This being the time and place, I call the March 2021 Planning and Zoning Board to order. Before we get started this evening, I'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting. Please sign in if you're providing public comment. I do have the sign-up sheet here. There are quite a few names on here. But when you speak, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name, and if you're associated with a group, please put that there as well. We ask you to take a seat at the table. We're looking for one per table. I don't know if that's possible or not. We're going to try the best to social distance if we can. We ask you that you please keep your mask on at all times. If you need to use the restroom, they're through the back doors. Just go straight back. If the room fills up, we do have overflow rooms within the building where you can view it through live streaming. We ask that if it gets more in here, then we'll look for guidance from the city to do so. I would ask that you please keep your phones on mute. This evening we've got a lot to cover, and hopefully when folks get to speak, we'll keep our time short. We'll start off with Shelley in just a minute from the city to make the presentation, and then the applicant will have 15 minutes, and then, as I said, the people that have signed up to speak will have 3 minutes to do so. And I'd like somebody on the board to be my timekeeper. Matt, if you don't mind doing that.
Sure.
For us. So the first order this evening is our vision and mission statement that we always go over for any meeting for the city of Belmont. And I'd like to read that to you. Belmont will be a vibrant, multi-generational community that incorporates small town charm and heritage with the entrepreneurial spirit. In our mission statement, the city of Belmont provides visionary leadership, high-quality city service to create a community of choice for our residents, visitors, and employees. The first item this evening is to set the agenda. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
So moved by Matt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Allison. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. The agenda is set. First item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes from the February 18th Planning Board meeting. Any additions or corrections? I know Nick sent some corrections in. I don't know if everybody on the board has seen that. I think it's more just a few statements in there. Nick, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to the update.
Just an addition to a statement was all.
Is there any other discussion on that? I don't think. It's very minor on what. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Moved by Dan. Is there a second? Second by Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Minutes stand approved as amended. So the item on the agenda this evening, give me a second just to get there. Is ZA 2020.02. Del Webb Community to rezone 462 acres site from general residential, traditional neighborhood development, TND, to general residential, conditional zoning district, GRCD. Of that 462, 449 acres will be that district, and 13 acres is proposed to be rezoned to neighborhood commercial conditional districts. To accommodate 809 senior residential subdivisions consisting of single-family residential homes and a commercial village at Armstrong Ford Road. So Shelley is going to present on behalf of the city, and then the applicant will have 15 minutes to make their presentation, and included within Shelley's presentation will be Kimberly Horn, our transportation consultant. And after these have presented, then I'll open it up to the board for discussion, and then we'll open it up to the folks here to speak. So Shelley, turn it to you.
Absolutely. Welcome. You guys can come on. What is the staff members in the back will assist you? Good evening. For the record, I'm Shelley DeHart. I'm the project planner for the zoning map amendment, CA 2020-02, proposed for Del Webb community. The request is to amend the city's official zoning map, changing the zoning classification for tax parcel ID 188444. The subject site is approximately 462 acres in size. It is located adjacent just south of Armstrong Ford Road. The property owner for this petition is Belmont number 1, US 321 74 Bypass and Southeast Land Management. The applicant is Pulte Group. Fred Matrulli is here tonight for Pulte. The applicant's representative is Bridget Grant of Moore and Van Allen. Now again, this request is to change the existing zoning classification for the subject property. The existing zoning is general residential, traditional neighborhood development. Now this is unusual to have a property with two zoning classifications on it. It's considered what we call a parallel zoning district, meaning that today the property owner could request to develop the property either as a general residential or a traditional neighborhood development. Now, added on the base zoning is it does have a overlay zone. It is that overlay directly ties the subject property to the South Fork Small Area Plan. So with this request, that's the existing zoning. They are proposing to establish a conditional zoning district that has both general residential and a neighborhood center commercial district within it. The intent is to accommodate a 809-unit, age-restricted residential community that includes a commercial village center located adjacent to Armstrong Ford Road. Now I'm going to take a minute to talk about conditional zoning action itself. So there are two methods of reclassifying a zoning designation on a property. There's a conventional zoning process. It is legislative. With this action, conditions cannot be placed on the zoning action, nor can the decision makers consider any promises made that night as it's only going to be this use, or even look at a site plan. So what it does, if a conventional zoning action is approved, it entitles development consistent with the minimum requirements of the zoning ordinance and all allowed uses within that zoning classification. So that is one avenue for rezoning. The second is a conditional zoning process. It too is a legislative action, but it provides the city with a very good tool to consider special limitations, conditions, and development design tied to the legislative decision. So basically, we are processing a zoning change along with a site plan that conditions can be placed on. The benefits of this avenue is it provides collaboration, predictability, and transparency to benefit the community, the development team, as well as the city's decision makers. So with that, I'm going to just start large pictures. So the red star on the location map is the subject property. Again, it's 462 acres in size. It is bounded on the west by the South Fork. To the north is Armstrong Ford Road. Across the street of Armstrong Ford Road are two communities of Cramerton. There's Timberlake, an established community, residential community, and Courtyards at Cramerton, which is a community under development. The property is bounded on its east side by existing residential communities in Belmont of South Point Ridge as well as Point Crossing. It is also bounded by the community of Amberley, which is still under development. The southern portion of the property is bounded by the waterfront, again, the South Fork, and it is adjacent to about 600 additional acres of undeveloped property. So the applicant's team approached the city back in 2019 and had a vision for a Del Webb community, which is an age-restricted, single-family residential community. So one of the first things we establish with the development team is we take a look at the zoning to see if the zoning's appropriate. We look at long-range plans, any adopted plans, and so forth as we move forward towards a development project. So the existing zoning, again, it's a parallel district. It has a general residential TND designation. The striped overlay is, again, ties the subject property to the South Fork Small Area Plan. Now, many of you were on the, involved in the adoption of the South Fork Small Area Plan. It was included with the update of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Surrounding zoning of the subject site is primarily single-family residential in the communities of Cramerton as well as Belmont. There are a few conditional zoning districts. There is a small pod across the South Fork, a B2 commercial classification, and at the northeast corner of the property, you'll see some bright purple adjacent to Eastwood, north of Armstrong Ford Road. That is an industrial designation, and the property is used as such. So I mentioned the South Fork Small Area Plan. That is the map to the left. This was adopted in 2018. Again, it was processed during the comprehensive land use update. You may recall the city was taking large zoning actions on vacant properties that were zoned general residential to help bring down the density. Well, the property owners approached the city and asked if they could enter into a memorandum of understanding to give them time to develop a small area plan. They developed and paid for the small area plan, which was included in the comprehensive land use plan. So the map on the left, the big white star, represents the subject property. So what was envisioned and adopted by the city for this area was a mixed use, I'll call it as a whole, a mixed use village. The subject property has 3 identified mixed use villages. That's the red area. There's a large one at the intersection of, that's Nixon Road and the future South Fork Parkway. Mixed-use villages are intended to have multifamily development as well as commercial. There's a medium-sized village center located to the north, right adjacent to Armstrong Ford Road. If you look at the southern point of the subject property, you'll see it has a small mixed-use village, and right below it, it's hard to see, but there's a bright pink area. It was envisioned to have a waterfront park in that area. The green area on the plan represented the anticipation of open space throughout the area based on environmental constraints such as steep slopes and streams, etc. And then the bulk of the project, which is the gold color, is identified for residential use in the form of single-family residential at a maximum density of 3 dwelling units to the acre. So again, the subject property has these various areas, 3 mixed-use villages, a large area for single-family residential, open space, and a waterfront park. Now I want you to take note of the white line that follows the eastern boundary of this entire small area plan. That is the South Fork Parkway. That is a very important planned road for the city. It is proposed to be a 4-lane divided boulevard with landscape median, 4 lanes, bike lanes, curb gutter, sidewalk, street trees, etc. This is intended to provide a relief road to South Point Road. It's a north-south running that goes down the peninsula, again parallel to South Point Road. So speaking with the applicant, we showed, they spoke to us about their vision. We showed them the city's vision for that area. The aerial photograph on the right side of the screen, the orange line, again, is the South Fork Parkway. This is a plan that was provided to us by the local MPO in coordination with NCDOT. So another area of concern, besides the visioning, is the natural setting of the property. So this property has diverse topography. It has an intermittent stream located in the northern portion of the property. There's floodplain, wetlands, as well as adjacent to the South Fork, which again is considered, it's in an impaired waterway. So after sharing all of this information with the applicant, what they present tonight is the project based on the various plans and visioning of both the applicant and the city. They are proposing an age-restricted community, again, a Del Webb community, with 809 single-family detached home lots on 449 acres of the subject property. That equates to about 1.8 dwelling units per acre. There's approximately 100 acres of open space, 106 acres of tree canopy preservation that is 25% of the site, and it would be placed within a tree conservation easement during the platting and construction plan phase. There's an associated roadway network that does include the future 4-lane divided road, referred to locally here as the South Fork Parkway, as well as off-site intersection improvements tied to a traffic study. And again, we'll get into some of these topics as we move forward. There's a future neighborhood commercial center on 13 acres where there was a medium-sized planned mixed-use village center. Based on the needs of the developer and the topography and such, the plan does request relief in the area of minimum lot width and maximum block length for some of the internal streets to the development that exceed 660 linear feet. So what does that look like in a plan? You have this plan before you, and again, provided at the screen. I'll point out some features. The small area plan identified a medium-sized village center. This is a 13-acre village center. They are proposing to restrict it to non-residential uses. The project does include a waterfront public park, not at the southern tip, as the plan showed, but based on the needs of the development, Del Webb community, and better public access to a public park feature. They are proposing it in the northern end of the development, adjacent to Armstrong Ford Road. There's also 2.7 miles of a waterfront natural greenway trail that they're proposing to build. The trail will start in the public park area at the north, follow the waterfront area all the way around the southern tip, and it does end in a location that would have the ability to be connected to if the property to the south is proposed to be developed. The project, consistent with the long-range plans, the adopted plans, does include the South Fork Parkway. There's about a mile of the South Fork Parkway within the project area. They're proposing to build 0.73 of a mile of the full 120-foot build-out. That is the 4-lane boulevard as envisioned. The northern portion that was proposed to connect to Eastwood is proposed to be dedicated as for future right-of-way. We will go into details as to why that is proposed this way as we move forward in the transportation section. The project also includes 22% open space, which exceeds the minimum requirement. Again, 25% of tree protection area. That is consistent with the ordinance. They are also proposing extra water quality conditions, architectural commitments, and a minimum 50-foot buffer around the project. Now, I'm going to take a minute to talk about this. Now, adjacent to the waterfront, there's a 50-foot wide riparian buffer that's already required. The 50-foot buffer that I'm speaking to on this is outside of a riparian buffer, so it mainly follows the east side of the development, adjacent to other communities, so would act as a buffer between same-like uses, residential and residential. So this is hard to see from this distance, so I'll turn this way. What's on the screen is a table of performance standards tied to the general residential zone. So the use and building types permitted in the general residential zone is residential use, but the building type can be either single-family detached homes or some alley-fed product. That could be a single-family detached home that has an alley access, or actually townhomes. So if it was a by-right development, they could propose 30% of the total 809 units to be in townhomes. That would equate to about 240 units. They're committing to all single-family detached homes that are street front loaded. The density permitted in the zone, and I'm applying the small area plan, the overlay density restriction, restricts it to 3 dwelling units to the acre. They are proposing 1.8 dwelling units to the acre. The minimum lot width for single-family street lots is 55 feet in width. They are actually proposing 3 different lot types with different lot widths. They are proposing 25% of the lots to be 42 feet in width. They would need relief. This is a request for relief. They are proposing 50% of their lots to be 52 feet in width. Again, they would need relief. And then the remaining 25% of the lots would be the 70-foot wide lots. So that is one of the areas of relief requested. Maximum height in the zone is 2.5 stories. They're proposing 2 stories. On-site parking, 2 parking spaces. All of their units come with a 2-car garage. Architectural requirements. State law says that local jurisdictions cannot request architectural commitments in the form of building materials or architecture. The applicant is committing to architectural enhancements that include building material, primarily cementitious fiberboard with mix of materials such as brick and stone, enhanced garage door treatments, and so forth. And you can page 9 of your plans, and I'll touch on it later, has all of the proposed conceptual elevations outlined. With regard to setbacks, the front setback is 20 and 30, and the building can be as close as 20, but the garage can be no closer to 30 feet. The side yard setbacks, at the time of application, it was 20% of the lot width. Now, we have since changed the regulations, but we're using what was required at the time of application. The rear yard, 30 feet. So the applicant is complying with the front yard setbacks. With regard to the side yard setback, they are committing to a minimum of 5 feet or 20%, whichever's greater. With regard to the rear yard, they are meeting the requirement of the rear yard setback. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about the Village Center, the Neighborhood Center commercial 13-acre area. So the applicant is not a commercial developer. However, they are providing some restrictions that would go forth, if approved, that would be applied when a commercial developer is proposing to develop that 13-acre site. So under the zoning classification, the Neighborhood Center commercial zoning classification is really a mixed-use zoning classification. You could have residential, office, civic, general commercial. They are committing to all non-residential use. Now, in the traffic study, we identified anticipated uses in that area. It could be a market or a grocery store, restaurant, general commercial, office, medical office, and so forth. So they are willing to restrict it not to allow any kind of high-density multifamily, but restrict it to non-residential use. Building type follows the use. By right, they're allowed to do apartments, townhomes, mixed-use buildings, or commercial buildings. They are conditioning the project to restrict it to non-residential building types. This project, when it goes forth, if approved, would be required to process a construction site plan review permit that would ensure that it complies with all the regulations in the ordinance as well as these additional conditions. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about the environmental aspects. So you have at your space a recommendation letter by the Catawba Riverkeepers and Lake Wylie Marine Commission. We were reached out to by various environmental groups and organizations concerned about the water quality of the South Fork. Again, it is an impaired waterway. They have provided a list of recommendations. They met privately with the developer as well as the city, and then we've been working together with the development team to bring forth some conditions that they would agree to. You'll also find at your area, you'll find a modified, it's titled South Fork Rezoning Petition Development Standards. They have committed to some enhancements in the area and conditions related to post-construction, active construction, and erosion control measures. They are highlighted in the document before you on page 6 and 7 of the document. And these commitments, most of them do exceed local, state, and county requirements. And I'd be happy to read those in the record if you would like me to. Otherwise, I'll keep moving forward with the presentation. So I'm going to take a minute to talk about architecture. The applicant has committed to some architectural enhancement, building material enhancement. The style of homes are very nice, and I'll show you in the next slide. But we were invited, some planning board members as well as council members and staff did go out to a Del Webb community, and we're able to walk through the community to look at the types of home, the quality of homes, materials, and layout of an existing community. And they actually proposed some additional enhancement with regard to garage doors, minimal mix of materials. And then staff was very concerned about the small lot product, the 42-foot wide lot product. They tend to have a more prominent garage. So we've worked with the development team to come up with some enhancement that will help reduce the prominent garage appearance. And they have committed to one of the two features outlined here on the screen, a wall gated feature at the garage. And what that does is that creates a courtyard in the front, between the front door and the end of the garage. And I'll show you an example, and there's an example in your packet as well, or an architectural trellis over the walkway to the front door. So here are some examples. The bottom row are the smaller product. And the lower left, again, you can have a look at a close-up in your packet on page 9. It shows the gate with the little wall creating that courtyard. The middle and far right on the bottom row shows the style of architectural trellis, which again creates a vision and feel of a reduced prominent garage in sort of a courtyard active living space. The applicant's team held a community meeting on Wednesday, March 3rd. It was a virtual meeting held via WebEx. It was very well attended. There were some great questions and concerns voiced. In your packet, the minutes from the meeting are found in attachment C, but the questions focused on concerns about water quality and actions that could be taken, transportation, Anticipated non-residential uses, which within the proposed neighborhood commercial center, as well as the ability to age restrict a community. And again, the minutes from the meeting are found in your packet in attachment C. So this brings me to a very important topic on this project, which is transportation. So I'll start with, we worked with the applicant to create a healthy hierarchy of roadway that is well-designed, curb, gutter, sidewalk, street trees. We needed to ensure that included the Southport Parkway alignment. We looked at road connections to existing street. That includes Armstrong Ford, Nixon Road, and there's a couple of interior roads to the Amberley development for connectivity, and the internal roadway design. We worked very hard with them based on the topography, trying to create a grid type of roadway network. We also focused on multimodal as far as the network in compliance with all the city's adopted plans, our bike plan, pedestrian plan, comprehensive land use plan, as well as the MPO, they call it the CTP, the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, which added the requirement of a public greenway. They are proposing an 8-foot wide natural trail waterfront greenway. They are going to build it within a 20-foot easement and then offer the easement up to dedication to the city, so it can be used as a public trail and maintained by the city in the future. So the most important part of the transportation analysis is to consider development impacts to existing roadway network. This project did meet the threshold for both the city and NCDOT as it relates to a traffic impact analysis. As you are aware, the traffic studies are prepared by the city's consultant, Kimley Horn. They work for the city, not the developer. However, the developer does pay for the studies. We have Brady Finkley here tonight of Kimley Horn, and I'd like to turn it over to him to go over the traffic analysis.
Good evening, Brady Finkley with Kimley Horn & Associates. Address is 200 South Tryon Street, Suite 200, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28202. And as Shelley stated, we performed the traffic impact analysis on behalf of the city. And so tonight, I'm going to walk through through the process, through what we studied, the assumptions that went into the study, and then ultimately the results and the mitigation that followed. So like I'd like to do with all the studies is just step back and look at what the city's ordinance says the purpose of a development TIA is, and that is to evaluate and identify the incremental impact, traffic impacts caused by proposed development on the surrounding transportation system, and identify mitigation improvements to offset the impacts. The purpose is not to correct existing deficiencies of the transportation system, but to mitigate the incremental impacts that are caused by that development. It is consistent with both the city and NCDOT mitigation requirements. And as you will see here, the City of Belmont, NCDOT, the applicant, and GCL MPO were all involved with the scoping process that dates back to late 2019. As well as through the review and approval process of the traffic impact analysis. The TIA, as Shelley stated, it didn't meet the threshold for both the city and NCDOT for warranting a TIA. So this development, as provided by the applicant, was proposed or is proposed to be developed in 3 separate phases. And so what the traffic impact analysis did was look at each of those individually. We're cumulatively, I'm sorry. And so we started off with phase 1, and then determined the transportation impacts and mitigation associated with phase 1, went to phase 2, identified the mitigation there, phase 2, and then went to full build out, which is phase 3. And I'll show you what each of those assumed. So for phase 1 was 400 age-restricted homes, and you'll see there AM and PM peak hour trips were 117 and 142 trips for phase 1. And the build-out year for that was, at least for the TIA purposes, was planned to be for 2025. Then we stepped into phase 2, and that was adding another 408 age-restricted homes to include a total of 808. So the trips that you see there are the total for phase 1 and phase 2. And that you'll see is for the AM peak hour and PM peak hours, 200 and 245 trips, respectively. The thing to point out here that I really want to note is that the trips are based off of age-restricted homes. And so the trip generation manual that we follow, ITEs, does have a senior community age-restricted land use. And generally speaking, for the AM and PM peak hours, it's about a third of the trips of what your standard single-family homes are. Thinking about specific AM and PM peak hour timeframes, which is what's evaluated in the TIA. And then when we go to phase 3, which included the commercial, you'll see there the AM trips, total projected trips are 744, and then for the PM is 996. And that was based off of, like Shelley stated, land uses that were, specific land uses that were provided by the applicant to assume for TIA purposes. So here's the site plan that was provided by the applicant that was used in the TIA, and I'll highlight the 3 access points that we were evaluating. The first one is Armstrong Ford Road. You'll see 2 errors that popped up there. I'll get into why we're seeing 2. We evaluated 2 different options, but one being a full movement connection to Armstrong Ford Road. Access 2 is an extension of Nixon Road to the west through the recently approved Amberley development to connect to this neighborhood, which provides another outlet, not only to Armstrong Ford Road, but then also over to South Point Road and R.L. Stowe to tie into that street. One thing to note is, if you provide that connection, not only does it provide connection for the proposed Del Webb community traffic to get over, but also, folks for like the Amberley that live in Amberley, it provides them an alternative access to, instead of if they want to go west on Armstrong Ford, for example, which is not a lot of their traffic, but some folks may want to, instead of going out to South Point Road, going north, and then turning left down Armstrong Ford and doing a circle that way, they can now come through this development and access Armstrong Ford Road to continue west. And so there was a little bit of traffic there that we accounted for that was taken off of the existing network to come through this network and add and access Armstrong Ford at their proposed access. And then the third one was just for the phase 3, which is the commercial piece, and this was assumed to be a right in, right out to Armstrong Ford that would connect into the commercial development. So again, not another full movement, but a right in, right out. And that would be just, if we're calling Armstrong Ford east-west, just east of where their proposed access is. All right, I zoomed in here a little bit, and as Shelley was showing earlier, there is a what is referred to as the Belmont Mount Holly Loop, also the Belmont Mount Holly Connector by GCL MPO. Locally here, it is the South Fork Parkway. Regionally, if you step out and look at from a regional standpoint, it's a proposed connection on the on the CTP, so the local MPO CTP, that provides a connection really to connect north of 85 from Mount Holly all the way down through this section to just south of here to connect back somewhere into South Point Road regionally. Locally here, GCL MPO, which I'll show you here in just a minute, they did perform a functional layout of this specific section and also included it in their MTP, which is the physically constrained transportation list for the MPO, that snakes through where you see the yellow line of option A to the north, right there where Eastwood Drive connects into Armstrong Ford, and then continues north. And that's where their alignment is shown. So as we were scoping this, we were it was brought to us by the applicant that there might be some concerns with making that connection for option A. And so if it is the case and we realize that we cannot make that connection for whatever reason, let's go ahead and run another option in the TIA that says if we can't get that connection, let's look at an option B, which connects into Armstrong Ford at Cimarron. So that when we move forward with the TIA, we'll have both scenarios already determined and a mitigation determined for each. And so that's what we did within the TIA. So we looked at both an option A and an option B for this access. And it was an either or deal. There wasn't a scenario where we looked at both. As I'll get to here in just a minute, following the TIA, it's a follow-up with NCDOT. They provided a letter, which I believe is in your packet, that states that they're not going to allow that connection there because it creates a skewed intersection where Eastwood would connect into where option A is. And so for that reason, what I'm going to continue on and talk about mitigation is associated with option B. So here again is that same alignment that Shelley had shown earlier. So this is the functional alignment that was developed by GCL MPO that shows that alignment connecting through to continue north along the Eastwood alignment. Prior to NCDOT making that statement, when we were trying to figure out, okay, are we going with option A or option B, it was the city's preference to go with option A, and we were continuing down that road. So we decided to lay this intersection out to see if it could actually function properly. The major issues that you can see on the screen would be you have existing residential homes on both the northwest and the southeast quadrants. And then east of Eastwood and where this alignment would be is a major overhead transmission line, which is very expensive to move. So the question was, could we snake the alignment through to the west of the existing overhead transmission lines, but to the east of that house that's on the northwest corner of the intersection? But then the other constraint that you see is if you continue north where Eastwood makes the turn, you'll see another transmission pole that is very costly to move. It's located there, and so can we make that curve function properly and safely to then continue down south? The exhibit that you see on there is a functional layout that we designed. We worked with the applicants and with the city. They were willing to continue down this path and see if we can make it work. And so we developed this functional layout and showed that, there is a way that we thought that it could work, and provide it to NCDOT for review. However, as we'll zoom in here, NCDOT did provide a letter following their review that said that they would not accept it because of the skew that it creates. And I'll zoom into the paragraph there. And it reads, the proposed option A alignment reverts the connection to a skewed intersection, which poses potential safety, site distance issues to keep proper alignment. Other alternatives should be examined, including purchase of additional right-of-way from the parcel or relocation of transmission utility. So either take the house or the transmission proposed, but they were not willing to accept the skewed intersection. So with that, since then, we have been moving forward with the option B. So to step back and look at the TIA specifically, these were the study intersections that were included. It included 15 study intersections. Important note is that these intersections were all collected prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So they were all collected within in 2018 and 2019. And so that was fortunate that we had those counts collected at that time before we knew what was about to impact traffic. We did include quite a number of approved developments that are surrounding that we feel would impact the study area that are not yet fully constructed. And that includes the Riverside development that's in Cramerton on the west side of the South Fork River, Amberley that we recently discussed, the Belmont Middle School, because at the time when we collected counts, Belmont Middle School was not open yet, so we added that to the volumes. The Riverside development that is across the street from Belmont Middle School, the Chronicle Mill development, McLean, a portion of that is built. We took, I think it says 50% at the time that the counts were collected. And then the Belmont Town Center that is southeast quadrant of R.L. Stowe and South Point Road, with that being 70% built out at the time. So the volumes for those were added to the existing traffic counts and the background growth of 1%. So step back out again. Here's our off-site study intersections, and now I'm going to get into the results and the intersections that we identified mitigation for. That would be these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 intersections that are highlighted here. I'm going to jump into each intersection specifically, kind of zoom in, talk about these. The first one is starting at the South Point Road 273 intersection with Nixon Road, R.L. Stowe. So thinking about the connection that will be through Amberley to extend Nixon Road, some of the traffic coming out and hitting that intersection. A lot of information on these slides, so we can get into details, but the outcome of the mitigation for this was looking at an eastbound right turn lane, so coming from the site to turn right to go south on South Point Road, and that being triggered as part of the Phase 3 mitigation. The next intersection is a Central Avenue and South Main Street intersection. A couple of things on this is, if you are familiar with that intersection, if you're coming from if you're coming from the Cramerton side, from the South Fork River, from the site, going towards downtown Belmont. Currently, if you're approaching that intersection, if you stay in the lane that you're driving in, it puts you in the left turn lane. If you want to continue to go through or right, you have to actually shift over a lane, which is atypical. It's against typical driver expectations. In addition, looking at the volumes, the left turn lane happens to be the lowest volume of the left through and right turn movements. And so one thing that we have recommended here is to reconfigure that approach in that intersection to, if you're driving there and you would typically expect to be in the through lane if you stay in that lane without shifting over. So reconfigure the intersection to do that, and then create a left turn separate pocket. So if you want to go left, you'll get in the left turn lane. Additionally, to add capacity and mitigate the site's impact, is an eastbound right turn lane. So you're reconfiguring that approach to make it a little safer, as well as adding an eastbound right turn lane to increase capacity, and that being 250 feet. And those both being triggered with Phase 2, so with the second phase of the residential development. One thing to know on this is that based on the analysis, the traffic analysis, it showed that queue for the right turn lane wanting to be a little bit longer, I believe 400 or 450 feet, something like that. But as we got through the TIA and we were talking through the mitigation, it was apparent that to construct that, you would be impacting a cemetery that is just to the west of the church. And so we worked with NCDOT, the city, and the applicant developed some exhibits to show what can we do. So, we discussed and agreed upon reducing that storage, which to 250 feet, which was about the maximum storage that they could fit in without impacting the cemetery. And it does still provide that capacity and level of service benefit by adding the turn lane. Next intersection we'll look at is the South Main Street intersection with Eagle Road. We looked at a couple of different options for this intersection for mitigation. The intersection, it's signalized today, as you know, but it's narrow, it's kind of constrained, it feels tight. We looked at a couple of different options, one being a westbound right turn lane and another one being a southbound right turn lane. When comparing those two options, the westbound right provided the most benefit. In addition, looking at the southbound right, it would have most likely removed some of the on-street parking that's already on Eagle Road. And so for that, we're recommending a westbound right turn lane at this intersection as a part of the Phase 3 mitigation. Next intersection is non-signalized intersection along South Main Street and Julia Avenue. So this intersection was included because there's some cut-through traffic, if you will, between South Point Road and South Main Street using Julia Avenue. And the traffic volumes do show that. There's quite a bit of traffic that uses Julia. At an unsignalized intersection, the side street approach during the peak hours is typically going to be bad already. There's not a whole lot of ways that you can really increase capacity and improve it without either, first you look at turn lanes, and then you look at a signal. Here we are, so it did not meet signal warrants for it, and in addition, the intersection is already operating poorly prior to the site. So looking at a signal there to mitigate the traffic impact of the site was not something that we identified, but I did identify separating out the left and the right turn lane along Julia Avenue. What that does is it significantly provides a lot of benefit to the right turning traffic to turn out, so they can bypass that left turning traffic that's sitting there, and decreases their delay considerably. And I'll point out, we said maximize. That was really trying to fit in as much storage as possible to allow the right turn traffic to bypass the left turn traffic. And we discussed in there maybe looking at maximizing it between South Main Street and the first residential driveway along the east side of Julia Avenue, which was about 250 feet. Our next intersection is north of the site. As you go up Eastwood, where you connect into Eagle Road, where at a T intersection, there's a lot of left turns to get over to 74 and over to the high school. Here at this intersection, there is, as we said, a heavy northbound left volume already, and the mitigation recommended here was to separate the left and the right turn lanes as well, and provide a left turn lane at this intersection, and that did mitigate the site's impact. And this is a Phase 3 mitigation. So as we get closer to the site, this is the Armstrong Ford and Eastwood Drive intersection. It is unsignalized today, and this intersection is a location where there's heavy eastbound left movements and eastbound throughs, and the site will probably be adding to both of those as well. So I'll walk through. There's different phase improvements as a part of this one. So as a part of the Phase 1 mitigation, we identified turn lanes on two of the approaches. So a turn lane coming from Eastwood, so separating out the left and the right along Eastwood, and then also adding a left turn lane to turn onto Eastwood from Armstrong Ford Road. And then once the commercial comes on to Phase 3, the traffic signal is warranted at that time, and improves the intersection considerably. In addition, with adding the signal was to extend that eastbound left turn lane from 175 feet to, is there felon here? 425 feet for the eastbound left. And I will say, in phase 1 and 2, it did not meet peak hour signal warrants for a signal. And so there are some delays, some pretty heavy delays on Eastwood on that unsignalized approach in phase 1 and phase 2, but it did not meet a signal warrant during the peak hours until it got to phase 3. Next intersection is moving down, so where access 1 as part of option B is going to tie into Armstrong Ford Road and create a 4-leg intersection at Cimarron. There's phased improvements associated here as well. And so in phase 1, we're looking at adding in the driveway, and you have a 2-lane approach coming out, so left turn lane coming out of the site, as well as a through right, as well as separating out and creating two lanes coming out of Cimarron. So you have a left turn lane of 125 feet, and then you also have the through right lane coming out of Cimarron. We did look at a signal warrant at this intersection as a part of phase 1, and the volumes just did not meet the peak hour signal warrant. Typically, so when it comes to signal warrants, there's, I believe, 8 total warrants. For volumes, you typically have to meet an 8-hour warrant. What we looked at here from a preliminary standpoint, since we just had peak hour numbers, we looked at just a peak hour warrant, and it didn't meet that. So typically what we would do is if it meets the peak hour warrant, then maybe we'll go out and collect counts to see if it meets even more hours of the day. But here it did not even meet the peak hour warrant. So in phase 2, similar thing, it still didn't meet the peak hour warrant for a signal, but more turn lanes were identified for mitigation as a part of phase 2. So for the second phase of the residential. And that's turn lanes on both the eastbound and westbound approaches of Armstrong Ford to turn into the site. And then as a part of phase 3, once the commercial comes online, it did warrant a signal at that time, at least the peak hour warrant. And then we looked at increasing the storage on 2 of the turn lanes. So coming out of the site from 100 feet to 425 feet, and then the left turn lane turning into the site from 100 feet to 400 feet. With this intersection, one other thing that was identified in the TIA was the signal. When you add the signal, it is obviously adding delay to Armstrong Ford. So the folks that are driving out there today, going through that intersection, do not have any delay, right? They might have a little bit of delay if they need to turn left, but generally speaking, they have no delay. So when it comes to mitigation, when you're looking at, well, really 2 things here. When you're looking at going from a T intersection, a 3-leg intersection, to a 4-leg, it's sort of hard to compare apples to apples, but especially when you go to a signal. So how do you mitigate the delay in all the approaches when you are adding in a signal when you're not going to get the major line, the major through movement back to what it is before the site. But at the same time, you still need to provide safe operations to be able to get out from the side streets. And so it's a really balance of those 2. But from a definition of what the mitigation would be, it becomes a little bit more of what allows the side street to get out safely, but not hold up the main street too much. So within the TIA, we also identified a consideration for a second eastbound through lane under this option B scenario so basically convert the eastbound right turn lane to a through right. So you have 2 through lanes going along Armstrong Ford, and then drop that second through lane as a left turn lane at Eastwood. NCDOT's review came back, and their recommendations did not include that. But I just wanted to point that out, that we did identify that as a consideration within the TIA. So with that, we do questions now or later, Shelley?
Let's do the questions later on then.
Okay. Thank you.
You can't leave.
Thank you. Okay, so I will wrap up staff's presentation. So with any zoning map amendment, we're required to find consistency with the comprehensive land use plan. Staff has reviewed the small area plan and the goals of the comprehensive land use plan and believes that the project findings can be made that is consistent with regard to land use, mobility, parks and recreation, and including environment based on the added conditions. So it's staff's recommendation to approve the project as conditioned, and I want to point that out, that it is based on the updated conditions that are provided in your area. There is still one condition, one other condition that we would add, a modification related to the age restriction, that we want to state that the development is proposed as, and it was evaluated as, an age-restricted active senior community. As such, in the event the development is proposed as a non-residential open market community, such change shall be deemed substantial, and the project would be required to follow Section 15.66 of the LDC, Land Development Code, for amendment being reconsidered by both the Planning and Zoning Board and the City Council for decision. So again, we considered potential impacts based on the type of use, which is not proposed to have children, so we did not consider impacts to the school, as well as it would affect the traffic analysis as well. So we just wanted to make sure that gets added in here. With that, there are conditions of approval before you in the area of land use, the age-restricted community, water quality and environment, architectural requirements, as well as the traffic study and transportation conditions, related conditions. So with that, staff is asking that you receive the report, public comments here tonight, and render a recommendation to the City Council. As with all recommendations, this board can recommend to approve as presented, approve with modifications, or recommend disapproval of the project. As a reminder, there are two findings that need to be made. One, that the map amendment is a reasonable request and in the public interest, and the map amendment is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan. So with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Shelley. So we have, the next part we're going to do is have the applicant for 15 minutes, and it appears to me there's 3 groups here for the applicant. And so we have a total of 15 minutes, and I don't care how you do it, how y'all want to divide it up, but we got 15 minutes between Moore Van Allen, Pulte Homes, and ESP. So, Matt, are you going to be our timekeeper? So you must be Bridget.
We can do this. We
Okay.
appreciate your patience tonight. It's been a long night already.
Yeah.
My name is Bridget Grant. I'm a land use consultant with Moore & Van Allen. Pleased to be here tonight to assist the Pulte team on the rezoning. I'm here with Fred Matrulli and Jeremy Huntsman with Pulte, as well as Matt Mandel, Matt Reiking, and Skylar White with ESP Associates. I'm going to let Fred talk a little bit about the Pulte core values and development process, and then I'll give a little bit more to build on to what Shelley presented.
Hi, my name is, excuse me, Fred Matrulli. I'm with Pulte Homes here in Charlotte. I head up the land acquisition team for our office here, so I have the fun job of trying to find great communities to build neighborhoods in, and we're really excited to be here in Belmont. Just a little bit about Pulte, the company. We're called the Pulte Group because we operate under several brands. We have actually 4 brands. We have a first-time buyer brand, which is called Syntex Homes, a first move-up, which is standard Pulte brand, We have John Whelan Homes, which is a luxury brand. And then finally, Del Webb, as you have been hearing about tonight. Del Webb is our age-restricted premier resort community brand that we operate under. We have many Del Webbs across the country in all the major markets. We've done 2 here in the Charlotte, North Carolina, South Carolina area. We mentioned Carolina Orchards, which some of the folks in this room had visited, and I hope they enjoyed that. What you see there, if you have an opportunity to go see it, it will be much like you'll see here at Belmont. So you get a good feel of what you're going to see, what you're going to experience, and what's going to be ingrained into the fabric of the community. Like everyone was saying, it's all age restricted. I just want to make sure everyone hears that. Some of the big features you see with the Del Webb, you see a nicely done grand entry feature. You'll see very heavily landscaped boulevards leading into the community, including the South Fork Parkway, which will be heavily landscaped and a nice feature from Belmont. Inside the community, you'll have 3 different lot sizes, as Shelley mentioned. On those 3 different lot sizes, we'll offer 3 different product types. The smallest starts at about 1,700 square feet, and then they grow up to the largest, close to 3,000 square feet. Lastly, aside from the trail feature that's going to be public, private amenities are offered for Del Webb residents, which are very extensive. It's typically a 20,000 square foot facility with a resort-style pool, an indoor pool, pickleball courts, tennis courts, bocce ball courts, a workout facility, arts and craft room, a full kitchen. So there's a lot of things that happen in this place. It's kind of the headquarters for all the committees that go on inside of Del Webb, which is those feed are fed from the actual residents. The residents are very involved into not only the Del Webb committees and clubs, they also get very involved within the cities and towns that they're located in. So that's really, I just want to give you a brief little spiel on Del Webb. If there's any questions, we're here to answer.
Thank you again. So Shelley did a great job describing conditional zoning benefits, and I'd like to just build on that a little bit. Conditional zoning is sort of a tool in the toolbox. If we were doing conventional zoning, as she mentioned, we wouldn't go through the community meeting process or look for ways to raise the bar, get higher design standards or public benefit. So when we come to you for conditional zoning, we're seeking something that we're not allowed to do by right. Therefore, we have a higher level of community engagement. We provide certainty on the type of development that you can expect for the site. You get those higher level design standards and the architectural commitments that you wouldn't get with conventional zoning. And there's public benefit, for example, on this one, the trail that's going to go across the river, or along the river. I'm not going to repeat anything that Shelley already presented, so I'm just going to jump ahead. Everyone's familiar with where the site is and land use consistency. Shelley did a great job describing the site plan. So I'm just going to go to the overview again. We're asking for this request because the zoning is necessary for flexibility in the lot sizes. I'm sure you've all heard that there's a desire to have smaller lots, and the benefit with smaller lots is creating larger swaths of common open spaces or more natural habitat. We're seeking to develop 809 residential units. They're all age restricted. It's 1.8 DUA with a robust street network, greenway connections, roadway improvements consistent with the transportation impact study, those architectural commitments. It's consistent with the land use policy with open space commitments, a public park donation up on Armstrong Ford Road, and a unified approach that guarantees a higher level of transportation improvements and a network of open spaces and infrastructure. I know this is difficult to see, but oftentimes it helps if we really look at what's required by ordinance versus what you get with conditional zoning. So we're proposing approximately 2.7 miles of greenway trail along the river, 6.74 acres of greenway easements, 21 acres of dedicated land for a future park, Common open space at 22%, which is higher than the 15% required by ordinance. Our proposed density is 1.8 DUA, which is lower than the 3 DUA that's recommended by the adopted land use policy. We're constructing 0.7 miles of the South Fork connector. We've got approximately 0.4 miles of easement to provide for the future connection that Brady described. We're proposing a cluster style of development that creates larger contiguous areas of tree save and open space. We are restricting the community to be age restricted, which has less impact on traffic during the peak hours. The age targeted community also creates less impact on schools. There's 13 acres reserved for the non-residential uses along Armstrong Ford Road. And with recent efforts with some environmental stakeholders, we are including enhanced stormwater and erosion control measures. Again, and my check marks turned into the number 4. So these are all of the things that we're sort of checking the box in this category. Brady and Shelley both talked about traffic aspects, and this just shows the South Fork connector through the site. We've included some perspective renderings to show the character and the feature of the road. As Fred mentioned, this is something that they look at as a main thoroughfare going into the site. It creates a great parkway feature with bikes, sidewalks, and the ability to create a very pedestrian-friendly environment. So just a few quick images. I think it's also important to point out that if we were developing this site under the single-family R3 and the units that we could potentially get, my eyes aren't that good. We're looking at potentially 1,300 homes by right versus the 809 that we're proposing. And the daily trips go from over 11,000 daily trips down to 3,500 daily trips. So when you're really talking about daily trips and you're introducing an age-restricted community, you can see there's quite an impact and a decrease in trips. Brady already went through all of the intersections. In terms of environmental aspects, we've gone back in and tried to incorporate several of the features that are included in the highlighted packet in terms of stormwater controls and construction measures. They're all highlighted in yellow. As Shelley mentioned, there was a park in the adopted land use policy that there was hope that we would donate. Instead, we're donating the larger park at the top of the site, the 21 acres, but we're still preserving that area at the southern portion of the site. We've already talked about the conceptual rendering, so I'm just going to sort of close out with where we finished, or where we started. We believe that we truly are using the rezoning process to raise the bar. We've had extensive staff efforts and community meetings. We've been meeting with stakeholders along the way to really try to respond to things that are very context sensitive and specific for this site. We've provided limitations on the uses, certainty on where the access points are, certainty on the materials, flexible lot sizes, a commitment to no vinyl siding, roadway improvements, and a lower density than what's approved for the site, as well as those greenway connections in the public park. So I'm going to stick to my promise and stay brief. We finished our community meeting by talking about the council vision, and that's for Belmont will be a vibrant, multi-generational community that incorporates small-town charm and heritage with an entrepreneurial spirit, and we are happy to potentially be a part of that vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Under 15 minutes, too, right, man?
We've done it.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the effort that not only the applicant, but the city staff has put into this, a lot of work, and even as late as this afternoon, right, Shelley, that's going on. So at this point, I would like to open the question up to the board, to any of the presenters we've had tonight, either the city or the applicant or the Kimley Horn, or traffic impact analysis. So, floor is open.
I've got a question, and it may be for ESP. Did you ever try laying out 1,300 homes on the site?
What's the question, Dan? I missed that.
They made the statement that they could build 1,300 homes by right, and it's my understanding that the homes had to be a 55-foot wide lot. Did they ever try to lay it out? Could this site even possibly hold 1,300 homes?
Good evening. My name is Matt Mandel with ESP Associates. Address is 3475 Lakemont Boulevard. We have not done a layout with 1,300 homes, the goal has always been a Del Webb age-targeted community, so we've always been looking at this lot mix and lot program. I think if you looked at that layout, though, with a different lot size and different program, you may be taking into, you may not have the amenities and some of the things that are being provided with this community, so it would open an opportunity for some more of those lots.
Well, if you're gonna make a statement like they could do 1,300, I just wanted to know if it was actually feasible.
Yeah, and again, that's just looking at the area plan and the densities that are permitted and the acreage of the site. It's a calculation that you could potentially achieve that number of units.
But in order to get even the amount of homes that you want, you're now asking for relief on the 55 feet to get more homes in. I mean, if you look at the density of what area you've developed, it's pretty high.
The request for the lot size relief is more to meet the Del Webb program. Those are the typical lot programs that they offer.
But it does get more homes
Correct.
in the area that's buildable. That's it for right now.
Matt, I got a question since you're already up at this podium. So I'm looking at the map, and it shows there's a 50-foot buffer that seems to go around the whole property, even on the South Fork portion of that. But there's also a 50-foot buffer along the 580 contour. Explain that with me. You have the 50-foot buffer, and so does the other buffer run with the 580 contour and goes 50 feet back towards the lake, or how does that work?
So there's a few things. They've self-restricted to a 50-foot buffer along the perimeter of the property against adjoining residential uses that would not normally be required. So that's the benefit of this zoning.
Right.
They're providing a 50-foot buffer along the South Fork from the property boundary. And then there's also a deed restriction in terms of another buffer that runs with the land and the deed restrictions of the property from the 580 contour. And that extends beyond the property line. And there's also some updated language in the standards and conditions, I think, that Bridget passed along to Shelley this afternoon in terms of the buffer size along.
It's just confusing when I read it, because I see the 50-foot buffer, but you're saying the 580, and is that the flood easement? Is that the Duke flood easement you're talking about, or is that the?
I believe so.
Okay, so it looks to me like you got 50 plus up to the 580, right?
Correct.
Because it says 50-foot buffer along the 580 contour on the map. That's what's confusing.
Yeah, we actually talked about that this afternoon with our team, and if we have items to update as part of this, we talked about clarifying that.
Okay. And one other question, it might be a Shelley question. South Fork Drive, which is in Point Crossing, has a stub out that comes down to this property right there at the transmission line. It's on the cover sheet if you want to look at that, but it's South Fork Drive. When they develop Point Crossing, they have a 50-foot right-of-way that was dead-ended there. I would think the intention would be to connect that to the adjoining property.
Where is that?
South Fork Drive up here.
Okay, thank you.
You are correct, that South Fork Drive does stub out to the end of that property. However, it stubs out into the Duke Energy utility line. So there's if you look at it, that's the Duke, if I'm looking at it correctly, that's the Duke Energy.
You can still drive under it.
Yeah, but you can cross the Duke Energy. I mean, they're crossing down here with
Okay,
Nixon Road.
so, well, we can talk to them about making that connection. It was
Or
not
at least have the
noticed.
right-of-way that would tie over. You know,
Yeah, I
whether-
haven't looked
Whether
at
it's a bike path or
topography.
whether it's a road.
Because they're not developing that road.
Right now.
Well, I'm just
That's
saying,
currently.
make sure we keep that right-of-way
Sure.
there and not lose that.
So it doesn't show up up here. Okay, it may be platted and not built. We will look into that.
It's not built.
Okay,
It's platted, but
Okay.
it's not built.
all right, so that's why it's not proposed to connect. because they connect to any stubbed out street, anything that's already built.
But hopefully we could have them provide enough right-of-way to get over to the other right-of-way they're going to provide, so if we ever would like to connect it up.
Okay, we will have the team take a look at that
Okay.
and see if they can accommodate that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out.
All right, I have one more from Matt. In the revised conditions, as far as the stormwater additional information, it's current in the, at least how it reads here, it's defined as a 25-year retention and then a 10-year outlet with a 3 to 5 day drawdown. I'm assuming the 25 years peak control and then 3 to 5 days is on a 10-year storm.
I'm going to defer that question to Matt Reiking
All good.
from ESP, who's on our civil engineering team. Matt Reiking, civil engineer at ESP, 3475 Lakemont Boulevard, Fort Mill. So the question about peak control, that was one of the requests that was made to us by the Lake Wiley Marine Commission and the Riverkeeper about enhanced control. One request was to make sure we provided enough volume to accommodate the 25-year storm in the BMPs. And that's something we think we can accommodate while still meeting peak control for the 2 and 10-year storms based off standard practices in the state of North Carolina.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify.
So the question is, he's not providing control for outlet, but what kind of control?
Well, to me, the 25-year storm peak control is more than sufficient, so that should be good.
I got some more. I was comparing what the recommendations were between the Riverkeeper and the Lake Wiley Marine Commission and what is been listed in our last-minute petition. The third-party bathymetric survey of downstream code before and after construction wasn't included in this. Can somebody speak to why not?
Yes, that was something that the team considered. The applicant reached out to, they do third-party monitoring all their projects. I think that was number 6 on the list of the recommendations. That is something they do typically on projects. That's something they will continue to do here on this project as well. We had discussions with their third-party inspector about continual monitoring of the South Fork River, how that would be monitored, what the threshold would be. At this time, that's not something that we wanted to add to the list and commit to at this time.
Well, this is just this is just a survey of the lake bottom before you build, and then a survey afterwards. So I don't understand what monitoring has to do with that, other than it's just a study.
I think there was a question about whether it was continual 24-hour day
No, there's
monitoring
another
or
one.
just a
That's the
bathymetric
next
survey.
question I've got.
Some of the provisions that were provided were specifically from River District, which is a 1,300-acre development with 8 million square feet of office and other uses. And so we were trying to right-size some of the recommendations. What we came up with was that it was a higher priority to provide the heavier silt fences, some of the larger buffers along the river, and do more preventative as one of the methods that we were willing to work with and try to figure out the best way to handle the conditions. Now, I can't speak to the engineering, so if there are more questions related to that, I can let Matt Reiking answer those.
Well, it still doesn't give, it's, still, I can't see why we wouldn't do this anyway. I mean, to me, it's pretty simplistic. You get the study done, you figure out what it is, and then afterwards you figure out if there's been an impact. If you're familiar with Browns Cove on the Mecklenburg County side, it's filled up. And they hadn't even done the River District yet. The other one is the third-party implementation of devices downstream to monitor turbidity, and that was left out. Can you speak to why that was left out?
Yeah, same response. I think we talked about the turbidity monitoring levels. What levels would you monitor? What are the thresholds? who's going to then review reports and provide recommendations. If you get triggered for some additional turbidity, what are the reporting requirements? It's really open-ended. Same thing with bathymetric survey. If you do it pre and post, if you're just looking for pre and post, we can provide surveys, but if they're different, what does that mean? You're not really committing to anything here. So that's why those weren't included in the commitment there. We feel like the other ones that we're committed to are viable options that can be handled through design. I think they were the ones that were really important to the Lake Wiley Marine Commission and the Riverkeeper as far as enhanced controls through erosion control, through construction, meeting additional peak flow volume requirements. They were concerned about discharges through erosion control, adding filter bags. I think those are all great ideas. Those are all something that can be implemented here. I think they've seen great success in other projects, and our team felt that was something that we could accommodate in this project and would be the best use of these additional measures that we've committed to.
And I think part of the issue you get into on the bathymetric survey is where'd it come from? You know, it may not come that site. I mean, it goes all the way up the river.
I
I
understand.
do like what they've added. I do like that third-party monitoring and having somebody on site that can stay on top of that. And, you know, that's something we don't have with the rest of the stuff in the city. You know, poor Gary and those folks are trying to go around and monitor that stuff, and it's impossible.
Yeah, the state environmental quality had recently updated their policies, so there's self-inspection requirements now. So it's a little bit more enhanced than it used to be. So the contractors, not necessarily licensed, but they go through some additional training for self-inspection.
Is it self-inspection or third-party inspection? Big difference, I think. Third party.
Right, but so by code though, it's self-inspection now.
But they're committing to third party, is that correct?
Correct. Will your third party be actually testing TSS at the outfalls for your project?
No,
And why is that?
that's not something that's part of the current third-party plan. Their third-party inspector is monitoring the approval of the construction plan. So they're walking perimeters, they're checking basins, they're making sure they're maintained, they're providing reports to the contractor and the developer. Also, you have contractors doing self-monitoring reporting. They should be taking care of that maintenance themselves. But the third party that the developer, the applicant is providing is their checks and balances to make sure those are getting done before you have any kind of inspection from county or state. So there's that second level of control for that. So they're going to be monitoring what's required as part of the state level.
I would
So we
think-
feel like we're meeting state and local, above and beyond state and local requirements.
I would think that if you were measuring your TSS levels for your discharge, you could prove that your BMPs are performing properly, and you'd have a record that shows that you're not contributing to the sediment buildup in the river.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we feel is above and beyond what everybody else is going to be doing. We're above and beyond state and local requirements already. So again, what Bridget said, right sizing this development for what we're doing with the additional buffers and the vegetative buffers and the additional enhanced erosion control requirements. We feel like we've already gone above and beyond for this development and to be good stewards of what's here in the South River. So that's important to us.
Yeah, just to add to that too, TSS is not necessarily a like hard and fast measurement. It's more of a performance standard. So it would be really difficult to even determine that by measurement without a full-on like NC state study.
We do it all the time on all of our discharge permitted locations, so just thought it would be a good idea. If I could change gears to traffic. I use Armstrong Ford Road every day. I drive out onto it to leave, to go to everywhere I go. So first question would be, and also this being an age-restricted neighborhood, I understand the age was 55. At least one member of the home had to be 55 years old to be an owner. I'm sure they're active seniors. And I would fall into that category, and I travel every day, and I do several trips every day. So have you verified the trip counts that you're using in your study from the manuals that you're using to do your study? Because if you've ever been in Belmont, you try and get out on Armstrong Ford Road to go into town at 7:30, it's nearly impossible. It takes as long to get out of Belmont onto 85 as it does to get to Charlotte. So how can this 800-home neighborhood not be generating considerable impacts to the traffic that we already experience today?
Sure, yeah, good question. So a few questions in there. Let me make sure I answer all of them. So
Sure.
The first one being the senior family home. We have not gone out there and validated that. I will say that comes from the ITE, which is Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual,
Sure.
which is used for the entire industry across the country. And that's updated regularly. And I think the latest edition is 10th edition, which came out in 2019, I believe. So within the past couple of years. So it's based on those trip years.
Okay. Well, 55-year-old folks are still working, so they're still driving at peak driving times.
Sure, yeah.
And they can still have small children too in today's days. So the trip count, I'm concerned that the trip count that you're presenting here is very low based on those numbers. Did you look to see what the trip count would be if it was not an age-restricted neighborhood? And what would be the impact to the numbers you presented tonight?
Yeah, good question. So two things. One that you hit on there, I want to confirm, but are children allowed?
It is a fully age-restricted community, and when they do their deed restrictions, it limits that people under the age of 19 can only stay there a certain number of nights consecutively.
Understood.
Can I follow?
Please, please.
How do you monitor that?
Pulte has processes and procedures in place, because I think when anyone's buying into an age-restricted community and you're following the rules, I'm sure if any of you have HOAs, people generally report you when you're breaking them pretty quickly.
Sure.
Yeah, when they know it's happening. The other question is, once it's been fully bought out, so to speak, everybody, the homes have all been bought, at what point is Pulte still an active group, or is it now an HOA and Pulte's gone?
It's a Del Webb community, but the deed restrictions remain with it regardless of ownership or when the homes turn over.
How does that work, Allison? Deed restricted communities, when the second home buyer comes in and, do you have to give proof? They have to give proof of age and all that?
They have to follow those, yeah, and it does carry forward to the next buyer.
It's on the deed.
Yeah.
It's on the deed.
I live
Yeah.
in one, and I know that they're all over me every day.
Mom and dad buying a house for,
Yeah,
the young couple.
yeah.
Mom and dad own the house, young couple's living in it.
Well,
That will not happen. In my experience, and I've had a few with Carolina Orchards, going in very well, you sign, your grandchildren only stay a couple weeks a year at maximum. It's very specific.
very strict.
It's not just,
And
it's not even the average 55 or over neighborhood restrictions. They're very detailed.
I'm kind of getting off.
That's okay.
And I can talk to you about it later, but I'm just curious about how does all that happen when you go through another recession and all these homes are foreclosed on, and then a big company comes in and buys them up? How's that controlled?
Again, they would have to go through the process to change the deed restrictions, which would be very difficult. I don't know what
It can
this
be
one is,
done.
it's probably 75% approval
Most
or
I
more.
can't speak to this one either, but most deed restrictions, for you to break them, it's 75%, or sometimes
Right.
100% of the property owners have to agree for them to be broken. So you've got a twofold thing here. One, you've got the entitlement commitment, which is the zoning commitment that's making it restricting the age. But then you have that secondary backup that even if someone tried to change the zoning successfully, you still have deed restrictions on the property. So you're getting two measures to control the age-restricted commitment.
And they have done this, all over the
Still asking
country.
questions.
Yeah.
And they're the most restricted I've ever seen on an age and situation.
But getting back to the traffic, I know you looked at other developments. You said you looked at a cumulative impact. I keep going back to what we experience living here in Belmont currently. When McLean was developed and all the traffic came up New Hope and turning right onto Armstrong Ford Road, coming through there, the folks from South Carolina coming through there because it's quicker for them to do that than go 49. I just can't envision this size of a neighborhood not creating impacts to our township and the streets that we have. We do have very narrow streets, very tight turning movements. You see the power pole at the corner of Central where it's ripped half in two because it doesn't have an adequate turn radius. How can we trust that this is not going to just further impact that because we never see the improvements that you're talking about being done? How would you address that?
A lot of good points. Let me go back to your question earlier that you asked about the difference between the single family and what the number of trips would be if it were all 808 standard single family homes. And so, so for the age restricted homes in the AM, you have 200 total trips, the age restricted, so under 100 or 808. For standard single family, you have 578. So it drops it from 578 down to 200 in the AM. In the PM peak hour, age restricted is 245, and the standard single family is 755. So it drops it from 755 down to 245. Both those are around 33 to 35% range, about a third.
It's roughly a third is what you're saying. So,
Correct, yeah.
So you deduct the anticipated traffic by over 60% because it's an age-restricted neighborhood.
Well, the anticipated is the age restricted. So there's not really a deduction. It's just that's the trip generation would be the age restricted, which is at the 200, 245.
Understood. But then they have 2-car garages, so that we have 2 adults at each house with 2 cars. So, and I'm sure all that was plugged into your formula. All I'm saying is that I think your traffic counts are way off. But just from what we see in Belmont today, and the condition of the roads and everything else that we have going on, that's one of my biggest concerns. You guys have done a great job responding to the environmental conditions. I think the overall subdivision is a great premise. The traffic and the burden that this is going to put on the infrastructure is where I'm concerned.
Sure. And to answer that question that you asked earlier about how will that be handled is through the mitigation that we discussed earlier. So they are agreeing to provide mitigation at 7 of the intersections, which is a pretty large number compared to most developments.
So you're saying tonight that this developer is going to pay for the improvements at each one of those intersections, and they're going to be done according to the phasing of their project?
That's the condition of
Yes.
our, that's on the conditions
Yeah.
of our recommendation, yes.
Based on what you presented up here.
Okay.
Based on what I presented up there, which is also included in the TIA, which I believe is on the city
Okay.
website.
So after phase 1, we're going to see a new turn lane at Nixon Road and Central, right? And at phase 2, we're going to see a couple of other intersections be improved. And after phase 3, we're going to see improvements at both interchanges going to signalized. So yeah, I mean, that's
and
part of our,
it'll be phrased to like not more than 200 COs until phase 1 is over.
So
So that'll
the
have to be
city
done.
takes care of that and making sure that, I'd point out too, that traffic count, that's for peak, right? That's not saying you're not gonna add more, there's a lot more people coming in there, but at peak is
Correct.
where you're designing.
Yeah, during the peak
Right.
hour, AM and PM peak hours of the typical work week.
Have there been any additional studies that look at the right-of-ways at all these intersections and whether or not they can be obtained?
Yes, so since the TIA was finalized, we went through and provided that information to the applicant team, and I believe they laid them out, and we talked through that. So, like I said, at the Central Main intersection, that intersection, that turn lane was reduced in storage because you had the cemetery there, so that was one thing that came out of that. I don't know if you guys want to talk about the right-of-way, if there's any other issues that you saw, once you laid them out.
And so you've already, would you have to acquire land property from the church there on that corner? Is that?
There's potential that we'll have to acquire some right away for these improvements. The one at Central Main that Brady's discussed, the initial improvement was, I think, 400 feet of storage. When we laid that out, it was going to impact the second driveway to the church and also impact the cemetery. And I'm sure you're all familiar with, there's headstones very close to the edge of pavement today. So we went back and we said this was a concern of ours. We worked with Brady's team and NCDOT to develop a mitigation that would limit the impact to the church and also basically eliminate the impact to the cemetery. And that was the recommendation that Brady provided tonight. That was out of the intersections, they all have their own challenges that we'll work through design, but that was the major one, and we were happy to be able to work through that with NCDOT.
But all of the improvements at that intersection are staying to the church side and not impacting the AT&T building?
We looked at both scenarios because there's a large brick wall there. There's a large, probably what you would call a heritage tree. We tried to make the 400 feet work there.
Yeah.
We tried to do a kind of an offset intersection, and that's when we came back and we asked for the relief. And so, yes, the plan right now is to do it on the church side and not impact the AT&T wall
Okay.
there.
Understood.
With that intersection, there's improvements for the traffic going up and out of it. There don't need to be improvements for traffic, like you said, making that turn, whether it's a left turn or a right turn. I'm just thinking if we're making an improvement for it going out, why aren't we making an improvement for it coming in?
Yeah, good question. So you're saying coming back down to go southeast down Armstrong Ford, down that way? So by providing the improvements on the eastbound approach to leave, it actually provides more capacity at the other approaches as well. And that's what occurs at a signalized intersection, because basically, if you look at a signal, you're given a certain cycle length, which is, you kind of think of it as a pie. And if you are limited in capacity on a certain approach, it needs more green time and it takes up more of that pie. If you add more capacity to that approach, it limits the amount of pie it needs to take, and it can spread it out and provide more benefit to the other approaches, even though you're not adding a turn lane or necessarily geometric improvements to those approaches. So it helps out and benefits the overall intersection.
Okay, just one more about that same
Sure.
intersection, sorry. Coming down, I believe it's Central, turning right, returning back to the subdivision. If they're coming from Franklin Boulevard down Central, and they're gonna turn right onto Main to go back home. Did the traffic count for this neighborhood cause the need to fix that turning movement?
No, I believe, is that the same question that you were
Well,
asking?
he's asking about returns to the subdivision
Right.
from both directions, coming from the Park Road side to the light and turning left where you have the lead green. But then what I'm asking is expanding on that and saying coming from Franklin down Central and turning right onto Main to go back home. Did that turning movement constitute a change or a mitigation?
It didn't. So the same type of thing. So by adding the improvements to the eastbound approach, it provided more green time to be able to put towards Main Street.
Okay.
And so by providing that eastbound right turn lane, it did mitigate the impact of the site.
Will you be changing the signaling,
Yes.
timing, and all of that?
Yes, yeah, so that's usually assumed to occur. We don't put that in the technical details of the TIA, but that's assumed to occur when they redesign the intersection to add the turn
Okay.
lane.
And when you looked at Nixon tying into RL in that intersection there, did you account for the new Chick-fil-A that's going on the corner?
Don't even talk about the Chick-fil-A.
That's another.
Because that's a traffic
That should
nightmare
be a traffic
everywhere you go
study
to
by
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A was not specifically in there, but it was, so no, we did not account for Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
You
Just-
did account for the
But you
town
did
center,
account for
though, right?
traffic as part of that whole development.
Of the whole development,
Yeah.
yes.
Right,
It was a
yeah.
part of the approved development.
So Chick-fil-A or Wendy's, it's,
Well, a drive-through
the
was
restaurant is
accounted
in
for.
there.
Here's what I'd like to do now. We may have more questions, so don't go anywhere. What I'd like to do now is the public that stayed here and patiently waited on us
Can
to
we
get
take
to
a
this
5-minute
point
break?
and give y'all a chance to
Walter.
catch your breath.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Pardon? 5 minutes. Chair will grant a 5-minute recess. Reconvene at 8:20. Come back to order, please. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open this up to the public, and also there's some several groups, environmental groups that are represented here this evening too. And so we're going to give each person 3 minutes, and as I call your name, my wife always accused me of having bad handwriting, but I'm not the worst. So I may struggle on some of these names here. So the first one is Will Newman. You'll state your name and address, and when you begin to talk, Matt's going to give you 3 minutes, correct?
Perfect, great. Thank you very much. My name is Will Newman, 3215 Grange Court, Belmont. And just try to make quick points, but I think that one that Bridget made, and Bridget, I told you I was going to name you right off the bat, that a conditional zoning gives higher level of community involvement. And so my first point was to make that the folks in Amberley, Point Crossing, South Ridge, and Timberlake would like to have a little bit more communication and know about what's going on with this neighborhood and some input. I think the TIA needs to be redone. It was done during the COVID, and part of it was during when Pole Branch Road was closed. I think that needs to be redone now that Pole Branch is open and COVID gets back and we're back in school probably in August. Right now there's about 9,000 new homes being considered, either approved or pending in this lower South Point Township right now, and I haven't seen a new road yet. There is a kind of overlooked a little bit, but Nixon to Upper Armstrong, and they mentioned Amberley on the phone, that was going to be just a little bit of traffic from that neighborhood. Actually, when you get it to South Point, it's a closer trip for South Point students to come down that road, go through to the freeway, and get to Eastwood than it is to go Julia. And you think that's a big cut through? This will be a definite cut through. Looking closely at the maps, I did find out that they're looking at a Belmont Middle School connector in the back of the Belmont Middle School that would connect down to this connector road. And there's 3 stub outs from one of the neighborhoods right there beside of it that would just connect onto that road and then connect onto the Belmont Middle School. One thing, Brady, I appreciate the pictures. That was one of the things I get all these, North and South Main, and you look at it, and it goes east and west a lot of times too, but the pictures I know what you're talking about now, but yeah, keep away from the cemetery, because that'll cause more trouble. In one of the things, it said Eagle and Lakewood traffic counts were higher in December 19 than March 19. There's just a lot more traffic in that area now. I mean, yeah, there's some because of the McAdenville lights and stuff, but it is just a lot more traffic. Upper Armstrong Ford and was significantly higher pre-COVID than it has been lately during COVID for the past year. In the AM, it backs up from Eagle and Main and Central, sometimes all the way to Garibaldi. And in the afternoon, it backs up from South Point Road, sometimes to the South Fork River Bridge. I added in there Belmont Middle School and mentioned South Point High School, but I did email and map to everyone that has you'll see an email. Look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Next person on the list is Russell Poole.
I'm Russell Poole. I didn't realize I'm an age-restricted individual plus 11 years, but I am. I'm here representing my wife. We reside at 5242 Courtyard Lane in Belmont. Mr. Divers, his commentary with respect to the transportation issue is paramount to both my wife and I. When you factor in the 800 homes, plus the 200 that are in Timberlake, plus the 71 that are at Courtyard, Cramerton, you're looking at over 1,000 homes that are going to be accessing the intersection of Cimarron and Armstrong Ford Road. Mrs. Poole and I travel 4 times a day, twice in the mornings, twice in the afternoons. That means our vehicles crossing that intersection 8 times a day. You multiply that by the number of homes, you're looking at potentially, just on the residential side, 8,000 vehicles crossing that intersection. I am absolutely all for the development of Del Webb. I find it difficult to comprehend the additional area that's going to be used for retail. When you factor in the homes, you factor in the retail, that intersection at Cimarron and Armstrong Ford Road will be untenable. It will be gridlocked. There's no need for the retail, in my opinion. There's more than enough available within a couple miles of that location. You have grocery stores, pharmacies, you have salons, you have all the retail you need in the area. The commercial does no benefit to anyone there, other than I do believe it helps Del Webb sell homes because they can make the sales pitch. So I would just ask that this commission, this board, temper their decision with good judgment and common sense. There's no way, as an individual, I can take 2 years of work and digest everything here and respond in any articulate manner to what was presented tonight. I don't have the financial resources and I don't have the manpower. So again, just good judgment and common sense. Drive by that area. Think about the traffic that's going to be coming in. It's going to be untenable. It will result in gridlock. And that's my biggest issue, is the transportation and the retail. The retail can go inside Del Webb if that's what they prefer, but adding additional retail to the existing home structures that are around there, it just isn't going to be tenable. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. The next person on the list is from the Catawba Riverkeeper Foundation. John, is that correct? Yep. Swarze, is that correct? Siri.
I'm going to set my own timer so I stay on time. Thank you all. Good evening. My name is John Searby. I'm the Executive Director of the Catawba Riverkeeper Foundation. I also reside at 397 Lake Wiley Road, less than a quarter mile downstream of the southern tip of this property. So I'm speaking to you tonight both as a professional interest and a personal interest. Our job at the Catawba Riverkeeper Foundation, as it concerns development, is to ensure that the stated intent of the developer to be environmental stewards of our region's most valuable resource is actually executed. So all of the requests that we put through and have discussed with the developer are with that motive in mind, that the words that get put into the conditional rezoning are enforceable and that they will have positive impacts on protecting our waterways. You all are aware that the South Fork River is an impaired river under the EPA Clean Water Act. It is not getting better. This is the largest undeveloped piece of property on all of Lake Wiley, and I think as planning and zoning commissioners, you should take very seriously the responsibility to protect the environmental issues that this property could cause. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. The next person on the list is Brandon Jones.
Thank you. My name is Brandon Jones. I'm the Riverkeeper at the Catawba Riverkeeper Foundation. I reside in Charlotte at 5015 Doris Avenue. As John said, the Riverkeeper Foundation is a nonprofit who educate and advocate for the Catawba River and all its tributaries. We also work very closely with other local groups within the basin, including the Lake Wiley Marine Commission. This area has a lot of problems. The vast majority of those problems are related to non-point source pollution, so runoff. Unfortunately, there's no way around it. Having a very large development on the banks is going to increase that runoff. However, there are lots of strategies that we've seen being employed in Mecklenburg County, in York County, and across both states, actually, to help mitigate that, and that's what we suggested. And we're very appreciative to both Del Webb and the Planning Board for meeting with us and incorporating a lot of those changes. You know, particularly appreciative of the sedimentation improvements that were in there. So the request to increase the size of the basins, that's really, really important for that sediment reduction, giving it time for some of those clay particulates to fall out. The stabilization requirements, the filter bags, the increased use of high hazard silt fence, all those things are very important to decreasing the amount of both turbidity and TSS that are going into the river. You know, the recommendations that weren't included on there are primarily focused on nutrients and monitoring. Nutrients are a big problem in the South Fork and all of Lake Wiley. There's actually a total maximum daily limit already for nutrients that was put in place back in 1995. It has not gotten better. The lake is still considered eutrophic. That branch in particular has high amounts of invasive species and continues to grow and have more and more plant life because we have so much coming down the river, again, primarily from that non-point source pollution. On the monitoring side, you know, right now all of our performance standards are theoretical based. They're saying if you build a retention pond of this size with this type of soil and we get this much rain, it should settle out and 85% of that will be captured in there. And that's great in theory, and when it works, that's wonderful. But if no one's measuring the outfall, if no one's measuring in the river, then we really don't know if those performances were actually reached. So what we'd like to see, and you know, there's a movement nationwide, is to go back to, again, to that actual performance standard instead of a theoretical one. So having the monitoring buoys in place to measure turbidity, having that bathymetric survey in place beforehand to see, you know, did that cove fill in or not? Those are hard numbers that you can use. And so that way when we get a call and someone's like, oh yeah, the river's really orange, it must be Del Webb, we can say, no, we've looked at the turbidity numbers and their TSS over the last 2 weeks, and it's not coming from them. It's coming upstream from somewhere upstream of Spencer Mountain or something like that. So again, we are genuinely appreciative of all the things that have been done here. I think it's a great start. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. The next person on the list is Brad Thomas.
Good evening. My name is Brad Thomas at 321 Paradise Circle. My wife and I purchased our home 30 years ago. Gaston County born and raised, so I have quite a history with the health of Lake Wiley, specifically the South Fork River. Not by accident, I have a very accurate way of measuring the sedimentation that is occurring in this exact area. We're directly downstream in Paradise Point. I have a horizontal irrigation pipe that requires annual maintenance. And for the last several years, for the first 10 or 15 years of that installation, there was a small, maybe an inch of sediment on top of that pipe. Within the last 3 or 4 years, it has been in excess of 6 to 8 inches every year that we are continuing to accumulate there. And I bring this up so that this is happening with our current guidelines and the current sedimentation measures and erosion control measures. There's a prime example on this exact site that we're discussing tonight that you can look at right off of the bridge that has a enhanced sedimentation measures at its finest that is collapsed right now. I encourage you to take a look at that on your way out tomorrow morning. But I just feel like not asking you to not approve development, but approve legislation that will allow them to develop responsibly and not continue to this problem that we have ongoing. Thank you.
Neil? Brendan?
Sir,
3 minutes.
The irony.
I'm on the other side now, aren't I? Okay. Yeah, my name's Neil Brennan. I'm the Executive Director of Lake Wiley Marine Commission. I live at 1531 Reflection Point Boulevard in Belmont. Thanks to the developers for instituting most all of the requirements that we asked for. You almost got it all right. But there's a couple more that we really need to have, and they're important, and they're things that are not uncommon to other developments. The 100-foot buffer, it's an average. I would ask that if it's not a 100-foot buffer and it's only 50 foot, you put double high hazard silt fence. That's a requirement in Mecklenburg County. The bathymetric survey before and after, that's to determine the extent of any damage that the project may have caused, so that you'll know. And as far as the continual turbidity monitoring, that's another practice that's put in place by Mecklenburg, and it's designed, as Mr. Divers indicated, to give you an indication of something that's happening right now. If something's going on upstream, that monitor goes off and sends a signal to somebody's cell phone, yours, Lead Inspector Gallagher, or the developer, or all of the above. If it goes off downstream, then you know it flowed downstream. If it goes off just downstream, you know it came from the development, so you can go check it out. It's what engineers do to check to see if the things that they put in place are working. It's a standard operating procedure in Mecklenburg, and we should not only adopt it here for this project. If you look at the maps you've seen, it's going to go all the way down to 273 eventually. This ought to be part of the land development code of the city of Belmont. So we've had a couple, as Brad just spoke to, he is silted up. We've had several of these blowouts, if you want to call them, on Bonham Road down in South Carolina, Torrance Creek, North Carolina, and South Carolina line, and of course Browns Cove, everybody knows about. We need these good people to go the extra step and put in these 2 additional requests that we put in. They already have a third-party monitor, and I understand there's folks that can help implement these additional steps. It's going to cost them, no question about it, but it's an indicator of what's happening now, and it'll be pretty much instrumental in keeping track of what's going on. So I ask you to modify the conditions further to include the ones that we had on your list. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Next person on my list is Brittany Mcallister.
Brittany Mcallister reside at 2130 South Ridge Drive, as can be seen on the map there. Coming just as a personal, not a professional outlook, but I'm a mom of 4 kids. My husband works here in Belmont. We feel very invested in the community. We're active members of Queen of the Apostles. And so it's just funny to me, I guess, only living here a few years, but part of what attracted us to Belmont is the small town charm, is the idea of knowing our neighbors. And my fear is, of course, growing too quickly, we will lose that small town charm. And I've already seen it in our own subdivision, where it's just become a group of commuters who are in and out quick. And as a mom, with 4 little kids, it's again the traffic. I mean, that's going to go back to that. It's very much a concern coming up and down Nixon. It doesn't have to be prime PM or AM hours. Even just trying to get across the light from Stowe to Nixon at off hours, the way that backs up turning left, which was not a recommendation that was made. Already, I can't go straight, even though that's a straight or right turn lane. So I'm just trying to envision, again, I feel like this is best case scenario for the land developed, but I just don't think the traffic and, again, the environmental has gone far enough.
Brittany. The next person on my list is Brenda Murray. Is Brenda here? Okay, thank you. And John Murray. Same thing. All right, so we have several emails that we have received. I don't know if they're comments or questions or statements that at this time will be read into the record.
I'm Anita Goodman. My husband Eddie and I live in the Point Crossing neighborhood that borders the large tract of land that the Pulte Homes wants to develop. Our backyard literally backs up to their property. We moved here 22 years ago from the other side of Charlotte because we were looking to escape the terrible traffic and rampant development going on in the Matthews area. We were impressed with Belmont because of the good schools and plenty of natural areas and trees. It seemed that Belmont was being smart about the amount of development they were allowing at that time. I know we can't totally stand in the way of development, but I am most concerned about the ancient trees and wildlife that lives on the 460-acre tract of land that will be developed. We are already dealing with the development of Amberley on the other border of our property, and we have been listening to the bulldozing of trees and hammering through rocks for the past year, and now we'll have to deal with that in our backyard as well. I was in the community meeting that Pulte Homes held a few weeks ago and voiced my concerns. Tonight, I'm asking the City of Belmont to please require the Pulte Homes to meet with the Catawba Lands Conservancy to make sure that the green spaces, tree-saving spaces, greenway paths, and buffer areas be made into a conservation easement, which I understand is the only way that they can legally be protected from future development. Belmont is clearly losing the charm that drew us here 22 years ago. For the first time, we are considering moving. Thank you for considering my concerns, and I ask you to please protect what little green space and trees that will be left. As a citizen, this is a different one. As a citizen within the Belmont Cramerton community that utilizes the road network, schools, and community amenities that the current infrastructure cannot support, the proposed growth and ultimate impact the rezoning proposal would inflict. I'm concerned that the traffic impact analysis was performed during a pandemic when the majority of the school and working patterns were not normal due to teleworking, and in some cases so much that several insurance companies offered compensation refunds on auto policies. The TIA should be performed when conditions normalize and timelines are set in motion for the Belmont-Mount Holly connector funding, and how that would impact the community with the additional proposed connections to Nixon, South Point Road, Southbridge Community, and Gaither Road. Lastly, I would like to express concerns with the commercial component of the development as out parcels within a residential corridor. What conditions will be placed that would ensure the commercial properties will not add additional traffic patterns and also fit into the area with the existing residential structures fronting on Armstrong Forward Road? In closing, this rezoning development should be postponed until current conditions are stabilized and sufficient up-to-date studies for traffic and environmental analysis are completed to ensure a healthy river community and to make certain that impacts do not directly affect the current citizenry. Respectfully, Jenna Goodman.
Thank you, ma'am. So that officially ends the public input, and I would like to open the floor back up, particularly to the city and to our traffic consultants and the applicant to respond as you see fit.
So, great. Yes, there was great comments provided this evening, and we'd like to clarify and answer some of those that were put forth. So I'll touch on the ones related to open space, tree preservation, conservation easements and such. So when a development is approved that has required open space and tree preservation areas, they're required to be recorded on the plat. So that would go in perpetuity. All open space will be designated as required open space and cannot be modified. It's double checked during the construction plan review phase, as well as the tree conservation area. That area is also placed in a tree conservation easement. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they do not, but they are recorded and run with the property. So that would address some of that concern. I'd like to invite Kimberly Horn up here to address some of the questions regarding the timing of the TIA when it was done, collection. There was a great comment about Poole Branch Road. It was closed for a while. We did look into that, and so I'd like to invite them up to answer those questions.
Yes, and thank you for the questions about when the study was performed and when the counts were collected. Because that would be a concern I would have too, is was it based on counts that were during the pandemic? As we were saying during the presentation, the good thing is that the applicant came on board, I believe in 2019, and we initiated the traffic study at that time, or at least collecting the counts. And so all the counts were collected in 2018 and 2019 for all 15 intersections. At that time, so to answer the question about the pandemic, all the counts were collected and everything was based on pre-pandemic conditions. I believe it was Mr. Newman brought up the point about the Poole Branch Road closing, which is a great question. So that's something that we discussed during the scoping meeting, because we had found out, I believe in November of 2019 is when Poole Branch Road was closing for maintenance and I believe widening down in South Carolina, which provides a connection up to South Point Road and to 279 as well. And so we, it'd be very helpful if I can bring up the study intersection exhibit. If you hang with me. There we go. All right, a little too fast. Sorry about that. Okay, so we had already had counts collected for just through a number of other studies that have been performed that were collected in 2018 and early 2019 prior to Poole Branch Road being closed at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the intersections. Sorry, 10, 11, so 12 of the intersections in between May 2018 and it looks like the latest one was May 2019. So we had counts collected at all of those between 2018 and 2019 prior to Poole Branch Road being closed in November of 2019. And we were missing a few intersections that were kind of along the Armstrong Ford corridor closer to the site, which were the three access point, or the three locations right at the site, South Main Street and Eagle Road, South Main Street and Julia Avenue, and Eagle Road and Eastwood Avenue. And so what we wanted to do was understand was how much of an impact Poole Branch Road had on the Armstrong Ford corridor. The good thing is we had all of the counts collected already prior on the South Point Road corridor, which we feel like was the biggest impact, because folks, if they could not get up Poole Branch Road, it would be much more difficult to get around to over South Point Road, but they may continue up South New Hope to potentially get to Armstrong Ford. And so we said, all right, let's go ahead and count some of the intersections that we had along that corridor, which were Armstrong Ford at South New Hope, South Main Street at Central, and then Eagle Road at Lakewood Road, which were three intersections that sort of surrounded the missing intersections, and say, let's count those while we count the missing intersections, compare them to the prior ones, and it showed that they were either right on par with what we collected previously or a little bit higher. So with that understanding, we talked with NCDOT and the city and determined that it was that the counts that were collected in December of 2019 were okay to use for those few intersections. So hopefully that addressed those two items, because those were two potential impacts to counts that we had discussed.
So you're using counts that were back in 2019.
2018 and 2019.
Have you accounted for any population changes since then?
Yes.
That came through to 2020 to now?
Yes, in a couple of different ways. One being an annual growth rate, so we took those counts and grew those by an annual growth rate, as well as applied the approved developments that we looked at. I believe here, yeah, and applied the traffic volumes from these approved developments as well.
But what I'm trying to say is that you have a lot more people moving into Belmont in general that are traveling in the same travel lanes. And without you having actual traffic count numbers, there's no way to validate the numbers you're using out of the books through your model.
So to create the existing counts, those were from actual counts we collected and not from, so that the
But those are counts that you did in 2018 and 2019, not anything recent.
And
Whether
to that,
it's a pandemic effect or not.
and to that point, does that only count developments that were above the threshold?
Exactly, thank you.
The approved developments that we used here,
Yeah, so anything that was under the threshold that might have produced just under the threshold would have been excluded though, right?
I believe River Mist was one that was under the threshold, but we still included.
Okay.
The other ones, I believe all of those met the need for a TIA. Yes. So we have that, but we also have regional growth that was added to. So you have two different elements that increase the traffic volumes.
Right.
I think what's important to remember here is that, you know, the TIA is looking to mitigate additional traffic that this development's gonna do. It's not gonna solve, we all know the roads are bad, you know, there's traffic from everywhere. I mean, we're trying to mitigate this additional increase due just to this development, right?
Absolutely, yeah, it's the incremental impact.
I mean, I know it's
Yeah.
tough, and everybody, we all hear about traffic, and we all can feel it. But, you know, if it's a bad level of service now, it's gonna be a bad level of service when we get through, right?
Correct.
So just make it bad for everybody.
So we just make it, so we continue just to make it worse and worse and worse rather
You
than
hope to keep it the
fix
same, right?
Idea
Until-
is, yeah, to mitigate whatever impact the site is having, so to keep it
Okay.
at pre-site levels.
Can you go to the Road A, Road B slide?
Yeah, the option slide?
Yeah,
Sure.
option A, option B. So option A is, what would be the requirements if you had to do option A, because option B can't be built for whatever reason?
Acquire right of way or move transmission lines.
Oh, to put in, to make option A work?
Mhm.
Yeah, so it would be either move the transmission poles to the east or purchase property that is on the northwest quadrant of the intersection.
Yep.
Or if NCDOT would have been okay or allowed the design that we showed that snaked through but had a skew, they believe that that created safety issues, so it was one of those three options.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment about the traffic counts and COVID and things. It's unfortunate, but our lives these days are unfortunate because of COVID, and we can't stop development because of COVID. So there's been recent developments that have been across this board's table that have not had traffic counts such as these, and I'm pretty thankful that we have the 18 to 19 numbers that we can inflate to get to 2020 and not guess or not look at and not rely on past studies to get to the numbers where we are. So I appreciate it, and it should be noted that the pandemic has screwed up all of our lives, but we're trying to approve and continue development both for the sake of Belmont and for the sake of our community and residents who want to move here. So, I mean, kudos to Kimley Horn for finding the numbers and for producing the studies. I mean, that 13 mitigation opportunities, they've chosen 7. The developers have chosen 7 to include in their, as part of their conditions. That's pretty commendable. There have been recent cases across this board's table where they haven't done as many as have been recommended. So I do want to make a comment about mitigation to the developer or to Shelley. We've talked in the past about having off-site mitigation be a condition of the development. If that development can't do those based on right-of-way, we've talked about in lieu fees. What is the process? Because we are talking about 7 pretty critical intersections over the course of 5 years, 4 years. So is there a condition? Is there a comment from the developer about in lieu fees? Are there some that they may not get right of way that they want to go ahead and enter into an in lieu fee agreement? I'd like to hear from you or the developer on that.
Absolutely, and I'll invite Bridget up to comment as well. So we have discussed the process. The mitigation is identified by phases, three different phases with certain intersection improvements or certain improvements tied to each phase. So the way it's handled in Belmont, when someone submits construction plans, that includes off-site mitigation, we let the development team know that before we can issue the construction plans approval, we need, if there's required off-site mitigation that requires acquisition of additional right-of-way, we need proof of that you own that additional right-of-way, and that's coordinated with NCDOT because they accept it as part of a road widening if it's an NCDOT road. So we wouldn't release the construction plans until there's proof that the right-of-way has been acquired. Now, if in the event the development, say phase 2, they go out, they're talking to the property owners, they need additional right-of-way. If they find that they cannot acquire the right-of-way, well, that sort of puts a stay on the issuance of the construction plans until that is worked out. Now, there are conditions in the draft that says that if they want to consider in lieu fee or work with NCDOT or the city in helping to acquire this right-of-way, it all has to go to council to move on. So there are conditions set in place for that. NCDOT, depending on where the required mitigation is, does ask for bonding on some of the roadway improvements on their roads. So that's in place. So if they're constructing so say they have the right-of-way, they've provided proof. NCDOT will probably be holding a bond for those improvements. They get the permits to start construction, and they go along in constructing, and then during that phase, those improvements need to get done. So that's typically the route. But again, we have put safeties in that allows the applicant to come back if they find even say 2 or 3 that they cannot get the additional right-of-way. It will have to go back to City Council for consideration of acceptance of in lieu fees.
Okay, thank you.
It's okay, I'll speak to the part about the commercial up on Armstrong Ford Road. As one of the commitments when we were looking at land use consistency, having the site being mixed use and having commercial nodes as part of the development was something that we identified up on Armstrong Ford Road as a way to be consistent with the adopted land use policy. So I wanted to point that out. And we appreciate the comments from the environmental groups that supported us on the efforts that we've made to date. There are a couple of items that are still outstanding. I think we'd like a little more time for us to go back and look. I think that Mr. Sayerby said something important, that they want the commitments to be enforceable. And so when I'm writing the conditional standards or those packets of notes that you read, one of the things that I try to do is write it so that it's measurable and enforceable, so that staff can look at each standard and understand they haven't met this provision, therefore they're not in compliance. And so when it comes to some of the monitoring aspects, we can meet the condition of providing monitoring, but then it comes to a question of what do we do with the data and the information. So I think that there's a willingness for us to explore it further, but we'd like to get more information on what that actually means and how it would be enforced and what we would do with the data and information. Thank you.
So which ones do you think you could live with? I do understand the surveying piece that, I guess Brad or somebody talked about having 6 inches of, all that's coming down the river. So you do the survey and you find 2 inches. Well, where'd it come from, right? How do you, I guess that's part of what you talked about, right?
That is
so
polar.
What out of the ones that we left off that list or y'all hadn't agreed, which ones do you think you would be willing to, that would be measurable, I guess?
So one of the requests was for us to provide 100 feet of buffer from top of bank or from the property line. Our original request was for 50 foot. Our original offer was for 50 foot. We've gone back and looked at, and we know that we can provide at least an average of 100. And again, we're still working on the preliminary engineering, so we feel like we've doubled that. We know that there are going to be areas that far exceed 100 feet, but you have to always put in the minimum and account for those pinch points. And so we've done the average of 100 to account for pinch points, knowing that there are areas that are actually much larger. I think the last 2 are monitoring conditions, and they were in their letter as items 7 and 8. And I would ask that Mike Reiking, one of the engineers, come up to answer those questions.
Great point on the bathymetric survey. I think our concern at this point is, are we talking about the entire frontage riverfront? That's quite a distance to do a bathymetric survey. And then again, to your point, you made a great statement about where did that sediment come from? Obviously, we're not the only development along South Fork River that's adding to that. It's already happening. So and also to the point about the turbidity monitoring, when we spoke with the applicant's third-party inspector that does that on a regular basis, we asked them what their opinion was on how to best manage this for this project. We told them we were working with the city on these enhanced erosion control measures, and they told us that it was in our best interest, money well spent, to enhance the control measures, additional volume, additional filter bags, more than the turbidity monitoring. They felt that that was going to have a greater impact on the development long-term, and the additional buffer that we're looking at was going to have the greatest impact out of all those conditions. And I think those conditions were a great recommendation. I think Bridget mentioned about right sizing. It was for the River District. It was Mecklenburg County, and I think a lot of them they transfer here, and they make a lot of sense. And I think some of them, while they're maybe great in a vacuum, not necessarily great for entire river frontage of development where there's other developments upstream of us as well.
Are you the civil engineer? Can I ask?
Do I want to be today?
No, yeah. I'm trying to understand the road. Can we get page 2 of their packet up? I don't even know what's in. I don't even know if it's in there. This is this sheet right here.
Which sheet are you looking at?
What are you looking at?
I'm looking at sheet 2 of 10, right
Talking
here.
about the plat.
The plat.
Yeah, the plat.
2 of 10?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I'm trying to read, and I can read these things pretty good. Where is on here is the full pond line? Do you have it on here?
The full pond, I believe, is the 580 contour, very close there to it.
Yeah, but
It's
you
between
got
570 and 580. 570 is 570 is the property line,
Right.
so it's at, and so we're off, our buffer, our deed restricted buffer,
What's
which
this
is,
line?
has nothing really to do with development conditions,
What's
is
that
off of
line?
580.
I don't know what that line is. I'm looking at if you look at, I'm looking at this line right here.
Yeah, our property line is basically the 570 contour. That's the dark bold line, so that's full
So
pond.
that's the property line. So what is the dash line that goes up into the creek, towards the creek?
The
dash line.
The shaded thick dash line with the dark,
Yeah, you can just come look at it. I'm not, yeah. And I should have just asked you this during the break. Are you crossing the lake, or is this the lake?
That's a tributary. There is FEMA floodplain there.
That is FEMA?
There's a FEMA floodplain there, and so we're
What
type of crossing to be determined.
who's going to approve it?
It'll go through state, and it'll also have to go through FEMA for a letter of conditional map revision to any kind of fill in the floodplain.
The one they're not planning to do.
But right now, it's a bridge with like a culvert.
It could be a box culvert, it could be a bottomless culvert, it could be probably not a bridge, it'd probably be some kind of pipe structure, has to be sized for
Another
that.
reason I don't want to do that.
Down there,
Right
that road.
Here.
Uh-huh.
It's just really close to the lake. That's my concern, and it could make the road move. And it's one of these where that's the road. If you don't, that's the road. I mean, we just had a bridge come through the Marine Commission for approval because it went across the creek. Okay? Yeah, they did a long span
Talking about
bridge,
that.
so it
That
could
tributary that
impact,
goes
I'm
through
saying it
here
could impact the
and
road.
where that road would be.
So what seem to be the issues, I mean, so we're looking at Were they looking at taking some of the mitigations back and reconsidering that and coming back to us? I'm
Well,
just
that's-
trying to
that-
level set us.
Yeah, my question is, are they withdrawing, or are they saying we're gonna look at it, but we still want to continue? I wasn't real sure
I'm
what.
not clear either, that's why I'm asking clarification.
We can commit to what we've offered to date, and we'd like to continue to move forward with the understanding that we are going to continue to look at this before we go to council.
Can you do that in a week? We might be having another meeting, just as an FYI, to discuss this case, and
We could stay on council for April and come back in a week and see if we can provide any additional guidance on the environmental aspects. Confirming it. I think we would like to understand if you would like us to advance what it would mean to do the bathymetric survey.
Yeah, I think the two outstanding concerns, I guess, that were left off. Again, going back to the measurable aspects, you know, there was a request for bathymetric survey. Is that request in one cove, two coves, or the entire river frontage? That's something we would like to understand so we can understand the impact and what would be required. So
well, can I stop you right there? I think, you know, part of this is for us to provide a recommendation, and then you to provide your professional expertise. I know you've got the third party, you know, in one ear saying you don't really need to do it, but I think what we're asking you to do is to go back to them and say, well, they really want us to look at this. So what would your recommendation be? Do we want to do it all along frontage? That could be option A. You know, every 100 feet, that's option B. You know, I would say come back to us and say this is what we could do, or this is some options that you could consider.
yeah, and I think that's something we will continue the conversation with the Riverkeeper and Lake Wiley Marine Commission.
And including them, I think, is even better.
And I think again, what would be the measurables? We do a pre-bathymetric survey, a post-bathymetric survey. What are the measurables to determine where that sediment came from, if it was from this development, if it wasn't from this development, and say we get down 5 years and we do this post-bathymetric survey and there's 6 inches or a foot of sediment there, what does that mean? We need to understand from our aspect what that means 5 years from now for the developer. So those are kind of the pieces that we've been trying to work through in the last couple of weeks and understanding. That's why we weren't ready to commit tonight to these things. And those are the tough measurable questions to answer for this project. The same thing with the turbidity. Who's monitoring it? Who's enforcing it? What are the limits? You know, we're looking at, again, state guidelines that we're designing to. The theoretical, yes, they're theoretical. I think we're going above and beyond that to ensure the theoretical is correct. And the third-party inspection. So we felt with that, again, that we were using that, the enhanced measures was going to give us the best result other than a turbidity monitoring that may show up and get dinged every now and then. But with the fine, you know, soils out here, what does that really mean? And that's what we're trying to understand.
But the thing of it is that if you do the monitoring and you do the testing and you prove out that your BMPs are performing as needed, then you have the ability to say that the additional sediment that's created in the coves or in the South Fork River didn't come from you because all your measures were meeting standard or exceeding standard.
All the reason more to pat yourself on the back and say, we did this Del Webb on the river.
And we did a great job, and we
did.
protected the river because we already know the river's impacted. So what are you going to do to help mitigate that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what level of authority we would have or the council would have on if levels got out of whack, right? I think it's data we just want to understand. And there's a cost to getting data, just like there's a cost to getting traffic data. So we're interested in the data. And we can go back and do our homework as a board. Maybe we need to talk with council or staff about, you know, next time we meet to talk about what we expect or what the measurables are. But from what I'm hearing on this board is it's just data that we want. On a monitoring, yes, absolutely. But on a pre and post, if post comes back that there's more, yeah, that you could say that the monitoring is mitigating. We can safely say that it did not impact. But we don't need to get data and then start, putting up stop signs, right? I mean, the data can help us discuss what this impact is going to do on the river, but we're not going to tell them to stop.
Well, the other thing
Well-
too is, are you
Well,
concerned?
I disagree.
Can I interject here for a second? So we have this great dialogue going on based on recommendations from some of these environmental agencies and groups, and we're making assumptions on how it's going to be used, what they really want. I wanted to see, since it came from a recommendation of the Catawba Riverkeepers and Lake Wiley Commission, if someone could come up and help clarify exactly how those conditions 7 and 8 would operate, the intent, and see if we can't get some clarity to move forward. I'm not sure
I'm not ready to
who
move
would like
forward.
to take that on. Because I hear
What
a
if,
willingness
what if,
by,
what
from
if?
the applicant to, if they could better understand exactly what that means, so they can commit to it and make sure that it can be implemented and understand how it's going to be used.
Do you think
that
it's
they're
something
willing to
that
do
if
that.
they came back in a week and the city and the applicant and the Riverkeeper sat down and tried to work through a compromise? Because I don't expect you to do it all. You've done above and beyond. And so somehow we might need to prioritize these. It's a win-win for everybody, right?
Right.
And come back with something that everybody's in agreement with,
And
if we can.
we definitely can do that, but I'm going to just ask this one question. Is it something that can be easily clarified right now, or does it need to have a larger conversation for it to come back in a week? And I'm looking at the, okay.
Why are we trying to get this done in a week? I mean, there's a lot of information here. That, I mean, I've got lots of questions and modifications I want to make just of the ones that that they say they're accepting, but they rewrote the wording. I mean, how far do we go
That's on which piece now?
on these items?
So the recommendations, the conditions put in there are
The
not
active
verbatim
construction
based
erosion
on the
control measures.
recommendation.
They rewrote some of the wording to make it a little more loosey-goosey.
That's why I'm thinking if it's the applicant and the city and
We'll be glad to meet and
And
to
come
further
together on
discuss
a-
this and bring it back if that's the wish of the board.
And I want to ask a transportation question while we're on it. So there's, 13 recommendations on, and so if you chose not to do some of them, I don't know what it costs to do a widen the intersection or something like that and put that money towards the river. Is that an option? Without spending? Well, I mean, you may not be able to get it all. What's more important? Or is it all important?
Well,
I mean, they're above and
in some way, I mean.
yeah, but they're above and beyond what's required, right?
It's almost unbearable now with everything that we've approved and all of the influx, people who come to love Belmont and want to come and live here, which we want them to do so.
So then we say the traffic's what it is, and then the other stuff they just need to work out.
Well, I mean, I think we're already getting significantly more than what's required by code, and I think any more than that is we're honestly kind of getting ridiculous at this point. Like, I understand there's a concern. Well, I think, well, I mean, if we
No,
want.
I'm off the
I'm
transportation.
saying if we want to rewrite the erosion control manual at the state, I mean, that's one thing, but, I mean, at some point, we got to say, this is enough. I mean, they're already doing significantly more than what could be here, and I think we're just getting out of
So
control here.
Gaston County's the redheaded stepchild of Mecklenburg County, even though we share the same lake.
Well, I mean, yeah, Charlotte-Mecklenburg certainly has a much, more strict ordinance, but that's not necessarily saying that we're out of compliance. I mean, we're still following the state manual. So at what point do you say, where's the problem? Is the problem Catawba County?
The problem's in Gaston County. The problem in Gaston
there's
County's
multiple
ability to
problems.
control the amount of runoff and sedimentation that's out there.
Yeah, but is it an issue of this one site in this one town, this one county, or is it a statewide issue with the erosion control manual? I mean,
We have the opportunity to help control it this
and I
one
feel
time
like-
for
and I
this
feel
one
like we are.
development.
we're already asking for significantly more than what would normally be required. I think that's enough.
It's not enough.
Well,
Shelley, back to you.
So what I'm hearing is that you would like to ask to continue the meeting to the next meeting. And again, it's up to the board. It would need to be voted on as whether you'd like to direct us to continue the meeting to the 25th, I believe we reserved next Thursday, for an opportunity to have the development team staff and the environmental groups to meet and discuss some of the remaining outstanding items and review the proposed conditions with that, and then come back on the 25th with a report. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Is there
For-
anything outside?
For
of-
environmental, but
For
we need,
That's my question.
For
but
water
we need to
quality.
get, we need to get through lot links. I mean, there are some conditions that have been presented that need relief, and that hasn't even been discussed. So are we okay with all of that, or do we need to
We
discuss
need
it?
to have that discussion tonight, so
Okay,
let's just,
fine.
we'll know what we need to do with the, so what are the other, the widths and the block lengths, right?
The block
Is that the?
Yeah, I don't think there was any discussion
Yes,
over
so
the.
they are asking for relief in two areas. They're asking for relief in lot widths. They are proposing 25% of their lots to be 42 feet in width, and 50% of their lots to be 52 feet in width. That is to correlate with the Del Webb community and product type. And the remaining 25 would be in compliance with the ordinance, so no relief is needed there. So that's one area of relief. And some of the internal blocks exceed the maximum 660-foot linear feet block length. And the ordinance says that it can be approved if the board finds that it makes sense due to topography and so forth, that is something that can be considered. So that's the second area of relief that they are requesting.
I have a question about the lot widths. Is there a way to identify which ones are 45, 52?
Colored. Look at the colors.
Is it the colors? Okay, all right. I can look at that.
Do you know which of the streets are exceed the 660 and by how much?
It's on here.
Where was that? What page is that on?
Block length exception.
Okay. So, what page is that?
It's on all of them, if there is one.
Oh, if there is one. So do we know, is there a list of how many there are? I guess that was my question.
What was your question, Allison?
How many blocks are exceeding the 660? Is there a list somewhere?
Yeah, it's
Did I
page
miss?
2.
Yeah,
Okay.
about 25, 25, and 50, right?
Yeah, it's about 25% or 42, 50% 52.
No. I meant the street lengths
of the
that
lengths.
exceed the
Street.
660
I got you.
length. How many are there in? Okay. I didn't think I'd have seen a list,
It's on the plats.
but you got to go to each one? Okay. Okay. But we don't have a list. It would be nice to just have a list and know which ones.
It is less than 5% of the total block length, and we are requesting that relief for a lower block length, and they were all contingent upon some of the topography and environmental constraints on the site.
Okay. And what is the longest length? But that doesn't have houses on it. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the ones with houses. Okay. Well, it's got to be like this one. Okay.
Sheet 2, 16 block length, index 2.
Shelley, while they're looking at that, on the lot widths, our ordinance doesn't go doesn't have an age-restricted component, does it? So we're applying lot widths to any kind of development, whether that be age-restricted or any others that,
That's correct.
Okay.
So we're
maybe
at-
if a parking lot conversation for this board at a time later to consider age-restricted as a unit, as a development, because it may be more prevalent, it may come up that we're trying to apply rules from typical developments to age-restricted, just similar to traffic, right? There are different standards for traffic in and out of age-restricted. It may be important to consider that in the future.
So the maximum capacity, they're at 1.8 dwelling units. correct?
Dwelling use to the acre of the residential, not the total site, but
Right.
just the proposed 449 acre section of the single-family development, yes. So it's 1.8 dwelling use to the acre.
I have an ask on the 50-foot buffer. You said you can give an average of 100. Can you show us on an outline what, I can probably look at the plat and tell, but what housing lots are impacted if you went to 100 versus stayed at 50 or averaged it out to 50? Is that possible?
That's something we can provide. We started to look at that today, which is how we
Okay.
came up with the
Sure.
idea to utilize the average.
That'd be helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think to that point, it might also be helpful to see approximately the outfall distance of each of the ponds to the end of the buffer. Because I think that would probably be more critical of a concern from an environmental perspective.
We've done some significant preliminary engineering on the site already, so we've identified the locations. They're not, subject to change, but we have a pretty good idea of where they would be at. So we'll discuss with the team and look to providing that to you next week.
Sounds good.
So I think it'd help on the clarification around that 580 and 50 foot too, because I do think you have close to 100 feet on most of the, so like I say, it's still confusing with a 50-foot perimeter, which goes on full pond, right? And then you mentioned the 580, the 50-foot offset, the 50-foot that goes with the 580 contour on the plat.
For simplicity, we're probably going to do an average of 100 feet from the property line. The deed restriction from the 580 line is something that we have to be mindful of when we're laying out lots because it's a deed restriction. But for the simplicity of the average of 100 feet, we'll take it from the property line, and then we'll show you the areas that expand beyond that.
So is a deed restriction a 50-foot perimeter plus a Duke flood easement?
The deed restriction starts at the 580 line and is a 50-foot corridor from that line. But for water quality purposes, we should actually start at the 570 line, capture that, and then it will go up. So there will be some overlap.
Okay.
We'll ask the board a question about the block length real quick. In the past, what we've done is asked for there to be a break in the lots with a green space to break up that length. Would that be something we could recommend here for them to consider when they look at their block lengths?
I guess which one are we talking about?
Some of them you can't. Well, I guess you could, like that one
Some
in
of them
particular
do.
on 7 of 10. You make the lots wider, but I don't.
Sort of like right through here, if they're wanting to extend the block length, why not just have a green space in between?
The block length is over here,
So on this side, then why don't they just consider?
but that's just a larger side yard.
Okay.
Does the board have is there a burning problem with greater than 600 feet? I just want to get the feedback from the board.
I just thought it'd be nice to know which ones they are, and we could look at them to see if there's more of a problem. And I just, there's that index, but it's hard, it's H to F, and
For example, they call that a block length issue on the main road coming from the intersection through the commercial through the subdivision. I don't really think that is considered a block length because it has no lots on it, there's no frontage.
and it's 4 lanes.
And it's
So
four lanes.
that one's not a problem, but I was
But
just,
if you get deeper into subdivision, they have 2 or 3 streets that happen to be longer than
Really long.
660.
have these?
Right.
What
we've done in the past is we've asked for a green space break between the run,
Okay, so
just
which
to break
ones are
up.
not?
Right.
This one?
I think what we're talking about to the applicant, if you look at page 4 of 10, I know you can't pull it up on the screen, but there's a street I has a block length exception, and on either side of those lots, so street L and street I have a run of homes. So the idea would be, could you make a connector, sidewalk connector, alley connector between street N and street J to break up that lot length? That, you may have to space out your homes in that location, but that would at least break up that long block length. Does that make sense?
I think we can, when we come back next week, we can take the chart that we have on the index, on G3, and put it on the color map.
That would be great.
Okay. But as a preface to that, we may be asking you to connect roads across lot lengths to reduce lot length.
Yeah, we've
So-
integrated several block line connections and had several green spaces, so I think what we can do is we can take that comment at the plan.
Right.
This
Exactly.
is the block length.
Right. Right.
Yeah, in a recent development, I mean, sort of precedent, we didn't ask them to do roads. In fact, I think we ended up with one, but, a sidewalk, a wide alley to help break up the row of homes. So those are some mitigation on block length.
There's several. I got it.
Yeah.
Just you think about
Lot widths, what kind of discussion you want to have on that? Everybody fine with, is that a big issue for the board, or?
Yeah, as an age-restricted subdivision, I don't have a problem with it at all.
Right, and especially the smaller, tighter ones are in the center. So I like that.
So we're
Everything,
looking
all the
at-
largest ones are actually the ones closest to the river, which is good.
So we're looking at block lengths and mitigation with the,
And maybe there's not any, but I'd like to have a
Right, where we got
nice,
more.
easy to explain and see which ones potentially could be
So
problems.
you
or
want a
not.
visual?
Yes, please.
Plan that
Definitely.
identifies the ones that exceed
And I think we agree the
block
boulevard is
length.
not a problem.
Right.
Not the
that-
boulevard one.
That's correct. It's already designed as a parkway with
internal.
trees and landscaping and so forth, and you would not want a lot of intersections in a four-lane divided.
And the one across the amenity area, that one's not. a
So
big
we'll have the
problem.
team create a exhibit that clearly identify the block lengths and actually look to see if there's something they can do on some of them that may reduce the number, requiring some open space or a walkway or so forth through the area. And then they need to come back with more information after we meet with the environmental groups and the development team regarding what implementing some additional conditions would look like. And
but
if
it needs to
you-
be a win-win. You heard Nick say, they've done a lot, so I think we need
Yeah.
to sit down with a win-win to,
We appreciate that. We'll do the block length exercise, and we'll also provide that buffer exercise. And I do appreciate, and I think the Poole team appreciates the acknowledgement that we have gone above and beyond on all of the areas. And that really is why we're seeking relief. The process is there. We're asking to seek relief, and in exchange for that relief, we've really tried to raise the bar everywhere we possibly could to justify those few exceptions, the less than 5% of the block length. But we will get you the exhibits to at least make it easier for you to review the package in full. Thank you.
One last clarifying comment from me. The commercial district or the retail area is conditional, so that would come to planning before it gets developed.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The retail is a conditional district, so before it goes to council, does it go through planning? What's that process look like?
Okay, so if the project's approved, we're approving the conditional of NCC uses restricted to non-residential use in non-residential building form. It would not come back to the planning board or the council. It would come in as construction plan review.
Okay.
and have to comply with all the regulations and allowed uses as restricted in this conditional zoning and in compliance with the zoning regulations.
Okay,
So that would
understood.
mean building form, setbacks, parking. We'd look at the architectural style as well. The LDC does have architectural requirements that there is a condition in the draft conditions before you that say that the architecture in that pod has to comply with the city's ordinance. We can regulate architecture in non-residential development. So it would not come back for conditional zoning.
Okay,
if
thank you.
approved.
So for that area, is it what's on that list that can go in the commercial, or are there other things that
That
can
is
go?
general commercial, yeah, if you notice, it's restaurants, general commercial, it could have a grocery store, medical offices, but general commercial is a pretty broad, category, as well as, I believe, I can't read that far, but there are some other uses identified in that. I think it could have a fast
Okay, those are just
food.
examples then.
I'm sorry?
Those are just examples of a broader.
Those are broad categories that something can fall in.
But once it's rezoned, they can develop by right?
That's correct, with
Based on
Thank you.
complying with the
Yeah.
conditions as put forward in the conditional zoning and the zoning ordinance. Right.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was limited to that, but it can basically be anything commercial can go in there.
Well, those are broad categories, so a lot
Yeah.
of commercial uses could fall under the general
Yeah.
commercial category. So it doesn't, it can, if a grocery store does not decide to go there, it doesn't have to be there.
Yeah.
You call it 130,000 square feet of what? Air is blocking it.
I'm sorry.
Well, this was the,
Retail.
it's retail, and an office building, medical office building is not retail.
No, it's professional office.
So is it 130 plus the others?
No, it's 130,000 square feet total that would encompass any mix of those uses, correct?
Could that go in right now as of a right, a commercial area, or is that what we're approving that by right for them as part of this?
Well, that's an interesting question because right now the subject property has dual zoning T&D, which
Mhm.
allows, in fact, the T&D zoning classification requires a minimum of 2% of a site to be non-residential, so commercial. So if this was developing by right, they could have this commercial by right.
Okay.
And it actually has it starts at 2%, and I think it goes up to like 25 or 30%, so it could be a lot larger.
Okay.
But how this is being conditioned, it'd be limited to this 13 acres.
Okay.
So we have a plan, right?
Yes,
Next
I
week.
think so.
So expectation, you come back with a workable plan with the three parties, and we'll stand adjourned until, make sure I got the date right, March 25th, which is next Thursday at 6:30 at the same place.
Same place, and so
Same time,
just for
6:30.
clarification, you've given us direction of what to bring back for your team, or to the board, excuse me. We'll be prepared for that. So for the purpose of the general public, what is being proposed is the continuation to next Thursday night at 6:30, in which the board will reconvene to consider the additional information they've requested. They will then continue deliberations and hopefully ultimately reach a recommendation to City Council. After the meeting next Thursday, it's anticipated that the public hearing would go to City Council on April, I gotta look at the calendar, 19th. Yes, April 19th at 6 p.m. So there's one more planning board meeting, and then ultimately the City Council makes a decision on the conditional zoning, and that is tentatively scheduled for April 19th at 6 p.m. Well, that's up to the board. I don't know if you consider your deliberations. Or will you accept more public comment?
I think we're closed on the public comment. I mean, they had the opportunity tonight to email. I would take emails that we could read. I mean, this was the only scheduled meeting. You know, I think the public had the opportunity, and I would accept emails trying to.
Correct.
It's a continuation of the meeting.
Continuation of.
How's the public supposed to comment if there's additional information that's being presented? You'll take emails after next Thursday's meeting?
Prior to the meeting, I mean,
Well, if I could add, there's also the additional opportunity for the general public to comment again when it goes to city council in April. So that would be based on sending those additional information, recommendations. All that information would be public on the website, and city council, the public hearing, allows public comment as well as the resolution tonight. So there's still additional opportunity for comment.
I mean, we're trying to be fair and get the information and do it as timely and as prudent as we can. So I thank the city, I thank the applicant for your time. Kimberly Horn, appreciate, I know the traffic engineer is not easy, not exact science, right? So appreciate that, and I appreciate the public and the Riverkeeper for your input. And so this truly is a work in progress. Anybody have anything else?
So the only thing I'm going to add is, so if the recommendations continue with this information, we'll need a motion and a vote on that directive.
To continue?
To continue, correct.
Well, I make a motion that we continue tonight's meeting till next Thursday, March 25th at 6:30 in the same location.
Second.
Motion, and there's a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
No. I just wanted to add to the record on a no vote that I think the applicant provided a reasonable request here. And I think this board, although we have a lot of experience in different fields that make this a good group, I think we're taking these things way too far. And I think all these little details need to be left for city council to decide, not for us. So just close with that.
Good point. Well taken. Thank you. We stand adjourned.